Welcome to Finding Home Healing. I'm your host, Sadie. I believe you were born with a light that guides you to your higher self and most passionate life. But for many of us, it's been extinguished or lost. My mission is to help you find your way back home to that light so that you can love deeper, live in your power, and truly thrive. For those lost or lonely souls, welcome home. I'm very excited to introduce you to my guest on this episode of Finding Home Healing. He is such an interesting human being. When I first came across his content, I was seeing him post story after story of these people getting free cars. And I was like, what is going on? This doesn't make any sense. And my partner and I ended up binge watching his entire YouTube 2.0 course for like 4 or 5 days straight. I swear we didn't even come up for air. It was the most red pill experience I think I've ever had in my life. He is an attorney in fact. His name is Brandon Joe Williams. He has done countless hours of research to really uncover the truth of what it means to be free. And if you know me or what I stand for at all, you know that I stand for freedom of the mind, of the soul, and now in this fringe concept or topic, I stand for freedom legally. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before I bring him on, I want to add a couple disclaimers here. There's probably going to be some cursing. He has a very colorful language. And if you are not into that, or if that bothers you, or if you have little children, please do not play this out loud. And if it bothers you personally, this probably won't be for you. He is very esoteric, like type of enigmatic person. He's very dynamic and has a lot of colorful ways to express himself, which I know seems probably surprising that I am into that or that I like that, but I just find his rawness and his authenticity very refreshing. So if you are also that way, then this will probably be interesting and fun for you. This episode will be really centered and focused around freedom of you as an individual, freedom in a legal context, freedom from, paying taxes since we are technically in a voluntary tax system, freedom in ways that I'm not always caught talking about, like the energetic, more spiritual context. This is like very cut and dry legal types of conversations that we're going to be having. So if you have always, or maybe never, but maybe you are now, been interested in learning the history of the truth behind the real United States and our government and how things work, what the law really says about who we are and how we interact with the government and with each other, and what's really true here. I keep saying that because the truth will lead you to your freedom. And we're going to be discussing that today. It's going to be a really, really fascinating conversation. I will tell you that now. When I first learned about all this stuff, it literally blew my mind. So that red pill experience you may have from this episode. We might be talking about things that you don't agree with, that you actually vehemently disagree with, and that's totally cool. We may talk about things that scare you or frighten you or that change your entire worldview, and that's all okay too. I want to give permission to any and all experiences that any and all of you may or may not have. Again, this is definitely a fringe topic for me and the podcast and everything, but that's who I am. I love exploring different ideas. I love being open-minded. I'm in the 99th, 95th percentile of openness. So I'm a very open person. I think you know that if you already know me and my brand and have listened to other episodes. So this is going to be a very, very fun experience for all of us. I hope that you enjoy. Let's dive in.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Oh
Good
my
to
God,
see
you're so
you.
pretty. I don't know if I could do this. I might hit on you the whole time, so I apologize in advance.
That's okay. I appreciate the disclaimer. I'll be prepared. Oh no, I'm so excited. I'm literally so excited. I'm like nervous. I'm sweating. I'm like, my palms are sweaty. I'm so excited to have this
You're
conversation
so
with you
cute.
today.
You are adorable.
Okay. Well, I was thinking
Do you
about
need some
how,
wine or something?
well, I have my ginormous mason jar of water here, so I'm probably gonna have to pee by the end of this.
If we get some wine into you, I'll try to get you undressed on the show. How about that?
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's something I was expecting that you would say straight up 100%. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready to receive all of the Brandon Joe
Let's
Williams.
take this show to the next level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, you're hilarious. Okay. Well, I've been trying to think about how to introduce everything that we're going to talk about to somebody like a layperson who doesn't know anything about this. And I was reminded that like I am that. I'm a layperson and I was so uninformed before I watched your 2.0 course. Like my mind was blown. I got red pilled so hard and I was like, this is the most fascinating information. Everybody needs to know this. As I told you, I'm obsessed with freedom, freedom of the mind, freedom of the soul. And this is freedom like on crack to the next level from a legal perspective, right? And it's just so fascinating. So I want to start potentially by like unwrapping what the difference is between the private and the public in the eyes of the law. Can you help us understand like what that means?
Sure. Remind me a little bit about your demographic. Remind me a little bit about your show and who watches it, so I can kind of get an idea of who I'm talking to, if you would.
Totally. Yep. So I stand for healing. My show is Finding Home Healing. So the biggest message that I have for people is in order to find the light within yourself, we have to transform and integrate parts of ourselves. And that's really to get our power back and to thrive as individuals. So my audience is a lot of people that are looking for support, like coaching and therapy, and that like to be exposed to things outside of the norm, which is why I thought that you would be a great fit because I'm a person who doesn't do traditional therapy. I don't do the traditional way of supporting people. I'm very much on the fringe and on the cusp of like new ways to help people heal and release negative emotions, heal and integrate parts of themselves, deal with their trauma, childhood or adult trauma. And I do think that a lot of my listeners would appreciate these new perspectives and getting to learn about what it actually means to be free in the sense of the law. If does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So, and I would say that I am also pretty intellectual. So I think that my listeners really do appreciate the different perspectives and actually learning like the nitty gritty raw information. And for me, when I watched your content and the YouTube course and followed you on Instagram and all that stuff, I was really blown away by how you were able to, for lack of a better term, like prove all of the things that you say because you literally pull up the law, the UCC, the USC, like everything that you say is backed up by data and facts. And it's actually the system itself that you use to prove your points. And I think that for me was like, oh my God, duh. Like, because I was somebody who had kind of heard and dabbled in a little bit of like the conspiracy theories that the government was a business and it's a corporation and we're not actually in a free quote unquote nation. And so when I was learning more about your perspectives and how you use the actual definitions of words, I was blown away. That was fascinating to me.
I love it. Okay. Yeah,
Does that
sure. I can
help?
do that. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll do a screen share. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I just made a whole flowchart on this whole subject. So this is going to be nice to kind of go through this with you. Okay, cool. Yeah. So we have the public and we have the private. Can you see this?
Yes.
So these terms are used all over the place, even within a lot of what I do, even with a lot of different people. And I've been trying to explain it for a long time, and other people have been trying to explain it for a long time. And I just don't think there's really very many good explanations as to what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I created this whole chart, and I basically broke it all down into something much more manageable and much more understandable. So you can kind of see it and you can kind of view kind of how it works and that kind of thing, right? So basically the whole point of what quote unquote the public means is it means the federal government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, which we can look that up, Commerce Clause Um, it gives Congress the power to regulate commerce in between the states. Let's see here if I can find an actual. Gives the Congress broad power to regulate interstate commerce and restrict states from impairing interstate commerce. Right.
Hmm.
Um,
So, in a lay person's terminology, what would that actually say? Like, what does that mean?
well, it says here early Supreme Court cases primarily viewed the Commerce Clause as limiting state power rather than a source of federal power. Um, of the approximately 1,400 Commerce Clause cases that the Supreme Court heard before 1900, most stem from state legislation. As a consequence, the Supreme Court's early interpretations of the Commerce Clause focused on the meaning of commerce while paying less attention to the meaning of regulate. During the 1930s, however, the Supreme Court increasingly heard cases on Congress's power to regulate commerce, with the result that its interstate commerce clause jurisprudence evolved markedly during the 20th century. So this is kind of like the bedrock of everything that we're looking at when we're looking at the public. The public is basically involving the federal government or contracting with the federal government or an involvement with the federal government. And it kind of started in 1930s to sort of move into this whole thing where the federal government only has what's called plenary power. Um, Plenary power refers to the complete and absolute authority granted to a governing body over a specific area without limitations, enabling them to exercise significant control and discretion over relevant matters, right?
Hmm.
So in the 1930s, we have this shift of the Commerce Clause being so we have 1,400 cases before 1900, and before
Wow.
that point, they weren't really willing to hear this whole thing.
Hmm.
But then around the 1930s, that kind of shifted, and the reason why it shifted is because of the 14th Amendment. So,
Right.
so we have the 14th Amendment in 1871, and then what we
Hmm.
have is we have a case called the Slaughterhouse Cases, where if we go to Google Scholar and we type in slaughterhouse. This is the massive watershed series of cases at the Supreme Court that essentially interpreted the 14th Amendment to mean that there was an entirely new country being made called United States. So
Mm. And that's the corporation, right?
yeah,
Like the
so this,
business part.
yeah, so this case here, you're looking at the actual judgment, the original judgment from 18, let's see here, 1873.
Hmm.
Yeah, April 14th, 1873. So 14th Amendment. When was the 14th Amendment supposedly ratified? Because it wasn't legally ratified. Congress has already covered that. But
Right.
when was it supposedly ratified? July 9th, 1868. Um,
And so let's back up just a second because for people who don't really know exactly what we're talking about, I want to give them a bird's eye view of like what it is that these things are relevant for. So the fact that like the United States is a business, that's kind of mind blowing for people to hear. Can you
well,
kind of like,
we have to kind of do a little bit of a history lesson before we start getting into what you can do with it, because it's a bit too much to
right?
try to put on the ground right away. Obviously, everything I do is designed with that in mind. What can you do with the information? But I don't
Hmm.
typically get into that right away. It's just way too much. It's just kind of starts as more of like a history lesson. And then we
Right.
move from that being a history lesson kind of more into what can we do with it, right? So if you look through these, where in the hell is my, oh, there it is. So so the public, quote unquote, was basically, it existed prior to 1873, but it was very, very small, and they didn't really want to hear much about anything besides, interstate commerce. Essentially, was the only thing that they could really have anything to do with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the 1930s, we start seeing this expansion occurring when it comes to the plenary power regarding the Commerce Clause, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so what happened was is if you look in the that same case, which is the slaughterhouse cases, you have these really you have this whole thing where they're trying to interpret what the 14th Amendment was trying to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have here this first quote, and I'm sorry for the people who may get offended by this word, but I'm just going to quote it because it comes from the Supreme Court. It says here, the Negro having by the 14th Amendment been declared to be a citizen of the United States is thus made a voter in every state of the Union, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have things here like the first section of the 14th article, to which our attention is more specifically invited, opens with a definition of citizenship. Not only citizenship of the United States, but citizenship of the states. No such definition was previously found in the Constitution, nor had any attempt been made to define it by act of Congress. It has been the occasion of much discussion in the courts, by the executive departments, and in the public journals. It has been said by eminent judges that no man was a citizen of the United States, except as he was a citizen of one of the states comprising the Union. Those, therefore, who had been born and resided always in the District of Columbia or in the territories, it's capital T, which means incorporated,
Mm-hmm.
through within the United States were not citizens. So basically, what they're saying here is that all the slaves were being released through the 13th and the 14th Amendment, right? Now, the slaves were not men or free men of the Union, as you'll see that kind of terminology as we go through more of these quotes. There's a lot here. These are the main ones that I like to get from this case. So they didn't really have a citizenship, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can see here, then all the Negro race who had recently been made free men were still not only not citizens, but were incapable of becoming so by anything short of an amendment to the Constitution. So what they're trying to say here is that the whole point of the 14th Amendment was to give the blacks that were being released from slavery some kind of citizenship. The problem is that the citizenship they were given is basically like complete trash, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Is
you
that the
have
same citizenship that we have now, or
no
is that
God. Oh
different?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So being a citizen of one of the states of the Union, that would be state citizenship. That's where all your rights are located, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being a federal U.S. citizen is what the 14th Amendment created. A federal U.S. citizen doesn't really have any rights at all whatsoever. They have what's called privileges and immunities, and they have very few of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that when you say you are a U.S. citizen, you're basically saying that you are that secondary class. That secondary class is run by the federal government. The federal government is what's called a federal corporation. You can see that in 28 USC 3002. We'll go down to subsection 15, definition A. United States means a federal corporation. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the word federal or state capitalized, that's referring only to corporations. If it was not capitalized, it'd be referring to the original non-incorporated states of the Union. So so by capitalizing this F, what they're saying is they're saying there's two different versions of each state. There's state of California lowercase s, which is unincorporated, and there's state of California uppercase s, which we'll get into a little later in this presentation, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
they capitalize the F, and you can see there's an article before that, A, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't capitalize this because it's the first word of the sentence. They capitalized that because it actually has real meaning, and it's referring to, if I were to define this word, it would mean in between the incorporated versions of all of the 50 states, which are totally
Ah.
different than the actual states themselves, which we'll get into a little later in the conversation, right? So then we
Okay.
go to UCC 9-307. UCC stands for the Uniform Commercial Code. We're going to find out where is that person. Let's see, 26 USC 7701. This is typically the definition of the word person that you're going to see everywhere in law. This one comes from the tax code specifically. This comes from the Title 26 of the United States Code, Section 7701, subsection A1. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation.
That is so, so fascinating because, like you said earlier, or in one of your videos, in the Constitution, it says we the people, which is not person. So
Yeah,
they
so people
changed
and
the word,
person. So people is referring to men in the union.
like free, yeah, like a woman or a
Persons
man. Yeah.
persons is referring to individuals, corporations, natural persons, etc., that are located in the incorporated version of the United States with all of the incorporated versions of the states, right?
Right.
And I'll get into that more. So United States, anything could be United States. You could have a bunch of different zones and they're their own sovereign entities and their states, and they decide to unite and create a nation, and then it's called United States. You could go and do diplomatic relations between the UN and like a couple governments or something like that, and you can call that conglomeration. You could call BRICS United Nations, United States. You could call the European Union United States. It's a bunch of states that are united. So the
Right.
thing is that this whole United States thing, it was brilliant because what they did was they banked on the idea that people think there's only one United States. Yes,
Mm.
there is, but there's really not because any states, which means any location or body of individuals working together for a common cause, you look at the legal definition of state, state and nation mean the same thing. So United Nations and United States is actually literally the same term.
Wow.
State and nation mean the same thing.
Wow.
And
That's
a nation
fascinating.
has nothing to do with physical location, by the way. We can get into that a little later. The
Uh-huh.
definition of a nation is just a group of individuals operating together collectively as a group, and they're working peacefully, internally and externally. And they're basically like sharing peaceful activities, just to keep it simple. We can get into that more later if we need to. But
Hmm.
so United States, United Nations, this all means it's all the same thing. It all means the same thing. It means different bodies of individuals that may or may not have a physical location because there are legal nations that have no physical location.
Right.
I have my own. The oldest one I know of is the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Military Order of Malta. I believe this is about 900 years old. They
That's
don't.
considered a nation.
Yeah, they don't have a physical location.
Hmm.
They are a nation that has nothing to do. This is the best example of the fact that the definition of the word nation does not require you to have land or a location. I could easily get some land for my nation, right? But I don't on purpose because that's not the whole point is that that's not what the definition says. And to feed into some false definition by thinking it needs land, that's false information, right? So this is my nation website. It's called the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition, right? And it's based a lot off of the way that the Sovereign Military Order of Malta operates. And I know some people are going to be like, "Oh, that's, conspiracy theory people, they have a lot of weird stuff involving this." I don't know a lot about that. I don't really care. I study the Sovereign Military Order of Malta specifically for historical reasons and structural reasons, not for religious reasons, not for symbolism. That's not the whole point of why I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this because I am structuring my nation based off of the same basic framework of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So anybody wants to freak out about Brandon looking at this, I don't care about that. It's not a concern of mine. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to 26 USC 7701 subsection A1. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation, right? Now, since United States is a federal corporation, United States is a person. And that's why you see in a lot of criminal lawsuits at the federal level, United States versus
Ah,
individual's name.
right.
The reason why is because United States is a person.
Wow. That's so interesting. Okay, so for people who like this is just brand new to, the United States is a corporation based off of their own definitions. Like you're looking at definitions that they themselves run off of in case law and in courts at every level. And the definition of a person who we are, but we aren't as a natural man or woman, which I know you have your own ideas about the term natural. But what we're getting at here is that there's a lot of like definitions of words that we have to look at, right? That's so interesting.
Yeah, if you look in the I'm literally working on a response in a court case right now, one of my cases. If you look in the slaughterhouse cases, the terminology that they use that you will not see anywhere in the United States Code is the term man, the term free man, which is not capitalized, lowercase f, and the term union, which is capitalized. So the way I do it is I say I am a man of the union. So
Interesting.
I don't use any of my own terminology. I use only the terminology they're using.
Right.
And that's how I get around, a lot of the sovereign citizen type stuff. It's because people are just yelling and screaming and they're using all this terminology they don't understand, right? So I don't do that. I just stick to their terminology. I don't need to create new terminology.
Right. So on that note, actually, so with the person, I know we're going to get into like citizenship and what being a citizen actually means and being a non-citizen national, which is a term that you use a lot, and the difference between a sovereign being. I don't know if that's a good entry point for us to talk about that, but that was something that really clicked for me when I saw the definition of citizen and you explained that. It was like, wait, what? Because that's so obvious to us. Like when we're filling out W-9s, when we're applying for jobs, when we're getting our passports, like being a citizen of the United States is something that we've been born into just knowing as just who we are, right?
Yeah, it says here number 3 on the W-9 form. I under penalties of perjury, I certify that I am a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person. And then where it says sign here, it says signature of U.S. person.
And
And
so, what is the significance of that? I just want to make sure that everyone understands because to a layperson, right, being a citizen is like, yeah, of course I'm a citizen. I wouldn't ever want to give that up. But let's go into like why that's such a crazy idea.
so in UCC 9-307, we have here the definition of the location of this person called United States. It's UCC 9-307 subsection H, location of United States. Notice it doesn't say the United States because they're talking about the person, United States. The United States, well, they say it here. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. So if you're on a W-9 and you say, I am a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person, you're saying, I am, we'll get into the word citizen more here soon. I am a citizen of the District of Columbia or some other
Like entity, like a
individual, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation located in the District of Columbia. And then here is signature of uh, individual, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation located in the District of Columbia. Sign here. That's what they're actually asking you.
so interesting.
So people ask me, well, what do we sign then? That's a long, we're not going to get into that yet. It's way too complicated to get into that right now. So going back to, where were we at? So going back to, so let's say we wanted to look up the definition of the word U.S. citizen. We're going to go to 28 USC 9102 subsection 18. This is also going to show you something else that's very shocking, the fact that a corporation is a United States citizen. You'll see some articles online where they kind of like debate this, like, well, over the years, it's all bullshit. The thing is that this is the definition of the term United States citizen. Any individual who is a citizen of the United States by law, birth, or naturalization. This is kind of a huge breakthrough I've had recently. I haven't talked about it on any show yet. So the word individual, people think that means them, their body or their mind or whatever. I thought that too for a long time. That's not what it means. It actually means individual proprietorship, which means sole proprietorship, right? So an
Yes.
individual is a sole proprietorship, right? And the reason why is back to the Commerce Clause. there has to be some sort of commercial entity in order for the federal government called United States to have plenary power, which means unlimited power, right? So what they had to do is they had to give you a business, right? So if you look up sole proprietorship, we can go right to the IRS website and we can look this up. A sole proprietorship is someone who owns an unincorporated business themselves, right? So you hear a lot of things about this whole birth certificate and social security number. The birth certificate is the articles of incorporation for the business called the sole proprietorship, and the social security number is the tax ID number of the sole proprietorship. And you can see that on an SS4 form when you apply to get an EIN number. This is what you need to open up a bank account. If you scroll down to the type of entity, it's very, very clear. Sole proprietor is social security number.
Interesting. And
So,
that's the all caps name that
so
you
the
were
all
talking
caps
about.
name is just a business, and the tax identification number of that business is the social security number.
Interesting.
And this is the big, huge breakthrough that's caused a lot of changes. I'll probably talk a lot about that in this presentation because I haven't talked about it anywhere else yet. It's brand new, right? So you have a business, and they assume that you, as the owner of that business, is the same legal entity of the business. That's where things get complicated. That's the assumption that you have to rebut. That is the core aspect of the entire assumption, right?
And you mean the actual natural man or woman being like me, Sadie Elizabeth Ackerman, has been conflated with a business called the sole proprietorship of Sadie Elizabeth Ackerman.
That's correct.
Okay.
So if you look up the definition of the word owner, because I've been doing a lot of research on this recently, it's all part of this flow chart. So the way that they basically, the only term I've ever seen in the public, as far as I'm concerned, you can see a whole term list up here on the right. You have ens legis, which means creature of the law, business, corporation, franchise, sole proprietorship, individual, company, natural person, human being. That's because legal persons infused with human rights, which is from the 14th Amendment, become human beings. Entity, domestic trust, business trust. There are other terms too, but this is a really good basic term list in terms of these are all just companies. All these terms means business or company or this basically that simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you ask yourself, okay, so is there any terminology in the public that you've ever found that would actually involve us as men, free men of the Union, right? The question is, the answer is yes. So as I started to dig into this more, we have this term called owner. So if you look up the definition of the word owner, the one that fits with the sole proprietorship is this one here. The term owner is used to indicate a person in whom one or more interests are vested for his own benefit. The person in whom the interests are vested has title to the interests, whether he holds them for his own benefit or for the benefit of another. Thus, the term title, like ownership, is a colorless word to say without more that a person has title to certain property does not indicate whether he holds such property for his own benefit or as trustee. So what does that mean? It's the same thing as a trust. So the structure of a trust is pretty simple, right? And I have it here over here on the private side. Trust is very simple. I would define it as a contract for one or more people to manage some kind of asset for the benefit of another or others, all under the same rule system set forth by the man or woman who wrote the contract, right? So you have the grantor or the settlor, right? And then I define each of these words in relation to the legal terminology. The man or woman who wrote the contract would be the grantor, settlor, or executor. The managers, quote unquote, are what's called trustees, and the people who benefit from what's going on are called beneficiaries. The assets or assets in the trust is called the res of the trust. That's taking this simple definition and translating it into legal terminology. So as long as you just understand these two paragraphs, that's pretty much, I mean, there's so much more about trust that you just don't really need to understand. This is basically all you need to understand about trusts, right?
And what's important about understanding a private trust?
Everything's a trust, public and private. Everything you've ever done, your certificate of title for your car is a trust. You are the executor of the trust, and the state of California is the trustee. And then your all caps name is listed as the registered owner for that car. That's the beneficiary. And if you look up registered owner, Black's Law, again, in order to have plenary power over your car, they have to turn your car into a commercial activity. So they listed your all caps name, which is a business, sole proprietorship, as the registered owner of the car. No one's ever looked at the definition of registered owner. Owner whose name is recorded in a security issuer's registers as the security's owner and is entitled to receive dividend or interest and principal payouts.
Hmm.
So what registered owner means is it means that you are, even when cops pull you over, they're trained to say the exact terminology. Are you listed as the registered owner of this motor vehicle?
Right.
So
Interesting.
what they're asking you in normal English, for example, if you go to 18 USC 31 and you look up the definition of a motor vehicle, we have more commercial. It's all commercial, right? So where is it? Motor vehicle. The term motor vehicle means every description of carriage or other contrivance propelled or drawn by mechanical power and used for commercial purposes on the highways in the transportation of passengers and property or cargo. Subsection 10, definition of used for commercial purposes. The term used for commercial purposes means the carriage of persons or property for any fare, fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, or directly or indirectly in connection with any business, which would be a sole proprietorship, or
Mm.
other undertaking intended for profit. Another thing that cops will do is they'll ask you for your social security number, and that's to identify you as a sole proprietorship.
Interesting. Okay. So I want to like try to put all of this together right now. So the Commerce Clause in the Constitution made, well, let me back up actually. The 14th Amendment, you said, is what made us into citizenship and the United States.
It didn't make us into anything. We were the white people were all state citizens, and
Okay.
so the 14th Amendment didn't do anything to us. It just opened up. It gave the released Negroes, that's their terminology. Again, I just use what they say. I try to get closer and closer. I'm all the time trying to get closer to their terminology. They can't fight against their own terminology. You see,
Right.
it's not a fight if I'm using your words. We're not fighting. I'm just using your words, bro. We're not in a war here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the whole point is it at the time, if you read the slaughterhouse cases, that whole judgment in full, it's not that hard to read. I mean, for brand new people, it might be a little bit tough, but it's not that hard to read. You'll see they were trying to give released slave citizenship. So it wasn't the most evil thing in the world when it happened, right? It's what
Okay.
occurred over the next 100 years. That's what
Right.
matters, right?
Right. Because what occurred is the United States got turned into a federal corporation that then they had to make the citizens essentially employees of
Well,
that corporation. Am I understanding that
there
correctly?
had to be, well, yeah, there had to be a commercial aspect. So the term U.S. citizen means employee of the federal government. Yes.
Got it.
There
Okay. So
always,
then,
always, 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 always has to be some sort of commercial interface. Always. Commercial term. The word you is even defined in certain areas to include commercial activity. So it always, 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 always has to have some sort of commercial aspect to it.
okay.
So when they
So,
ask you, are you driving a motor vehicle? They're asking you, are you commercially operating currently a commercial vehicle? And you can see that in 49 USC 390.5T. We're going to go down to the definition of the word driver, and you will see the definition. Driver means any person who operates any commercial motor vehicle. And even the word operates is a legal term. You can see it's clickable.
Right.
So,
Wow.
so is the driver, bing, 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 commercial term, operating, bing, 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 commercial term, a motor vehicle, bing, 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 commercial term. There's three commercial terms there.
Got it. Okay. So they had to turn everything into a commercial interface. Even us as a man or woman, they'd had to turn us into a commercial being, which is what you're talking about with the all caps name, which is the birth certificate. Like you're born as an actual being, physically born, and then you're all caps what we're calling the sole proprietorship now because of your breakthrough. That's now a commercialized interface that you are between you and the government, and that's what then sets the foundation for the implications later on, which we'll get into with taxes. Am I understanding all of that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can even see it here on the state website for state of California. An automobile is a passenger vehicle that does not transport persons for hire. A commercial vehicle is a vehicle which is used or maintained for the transportation of persons for hire, compensation, or profit, or
So
designed
interesting.
used, or maintained primarily for the transportation of property.
I feel like that's why they're so specific. Like to your point, they're so specific about calling cars motor vehicles, like the Department of Motor Vehicles and everything on the documentation that has to do with the DMV all refers to cars as motor vehicles, like very
And drivers.
specifically, and drivers.
Please list that driver, or you do an application for a driver's license. It says who is the person applying for the driver's license. It doesn't say type in your information.
Right.
If we pull up DMV driver's license application, if it comes up, we'll see if it comes up. Um, let's see.
I mean, I can't remember specifically, but I do feel like even on letters that the DMV sends you, they're very specific about either calling you a driver or registered owner or
That's correct. Yeah.
labeling you very specifically.
So registered owner. I'm not gonna get it. Anyways. If you look at the, let's see, California DMV driver's license application form. Let me see if there's a image we can pull up here. Ah, there we go. What do we have here? Okay, let me see here. Is that the application? Driver's license or okay. Interesting. It's a little different than I remember, but when I saw it, it said uh, person applying, name of person applying, right? And you think that just means you, right? No, they're saying name of trust, individual, corporation, estate.
Like that's how they get away with using those specific words.
That's correct. Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, all of this like really hit home for me when you shared and taught us that citizen meant employee. That in and of itself was just like ding 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 ding. Oh my God, everything makes sense. It's all commercialized. They had to treat us as man woman as a commercial entity, and everything that we have to do with the government, like you're talking about with driver's licenses and our homes, like everything's a trust. And yeah, it just
Yeah,
that tied it all together.
everything is rebuttable, and even in the 13th and 14th Amendment, they're very clear that there cannot be any involuntary servitude. So the thing is that every single thing I'm teaching you is all based on rebuttable assumptions, meaning you can go and get your certificate of title destroyed. You can go and change your citizens. You can do anything you want, anytime you want. And even the United Nations has very explicit there's a UN Declaration of Human Rights. If you go in there and look at like Article 15 and stuff like that, you'll see anyone can change their nationality anytime. No one can stop them. There's nothing There's nothing forcefully tying you into any of the information I'm covering on this show. It's all considered completely voluntary, including taxation, including citizenship, including driver's licenses, including using your social security number. It's actually a felony to even ask someone for the social security number. You can actually
Oh,
sue cops for asking you.
really?
Uh,
I did not know that.
I think that's 12 USC 408. Let me see here. Subsection. Uh, uh, subsection 8. Subsection A. 42 USC 408, subsection A8. Penalties. Discloses, uses, or compels the disclosure of the social security number of any person in violation of the laws of the United States.
Hmm.
So no one can compel disclosure in violation of the laws of the United States, right?
Wow, interesting.
And under the laws of the United States would be something like 42 USC 1983, civil action for deprivation of rights under color of law. Every person who, under color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory or the District of Columbia, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws shall be liable to the person injured in an action at law, suit in equity, or other property proceeding for redress. This is the one that everyone uses when they sue cops.
Mm. Hmm.
They use this one and they use the conspiracy counterpart, which is 42 USC 1985. This is when two or more individuals are working together in unison to interfere with civil rights.
Got it. Okay.
Conspiracy means two or more individuals working together in unison to do something illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So
But what's so
83, so let's say there's two people and they're not like working together necessarily. So it'd be this charge, but there'd be two defendants. And then let's say that they are working together, or you find out later that they were working together secretly. Now we have this charge, and then we would also have this charge, which is like 10x damages.
oof, yikes. Okay, so the big like shabam here is that the difference between public and private is that when you're in the quote unquote public, that's when you're interfacing as a commercial being. And when you're in the private, that's when you're interfacing as a free man, woman. Is that correct?
They don't use the word woman. I would need to reread it and see if they use the word woman somewhere. I would
Or
almost
just
go
free
so far
man?
at this point. I would just say the word man. I wouldn't even. I hate to say that, but again, just you can use the word free man. It's one word, and the F is not capitalized, lowercase.
Okay.
You can see, like I said, just if you just go and read, where is it? If you just go and read the slaughterhouse cases, you can see down here at the bottom. There's a really good one here. Um, let's see. Um, let me see here. Um, this is an interesting one. This is Justice Washington of the Circuit Court for the District of Pennsylvania in 1823. Um, let's see here. The inquiry, he says, is what are the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states? We feel no hesitation in confining these expressions to those privileges and immunities which are fundamental, which belong of right to the citizens of all free governments. Now, keep in mind, before 1871, the word citizen wasn't this horrible, evil thing that has commercial value. It meant what people think it means. That's why
Right.
everything's so confusing. Everything's so confusing because when 1871 hit and the 14th Amendment hit, people were really confused. And then when the slaughterhouse cases happened, the slaughterhouse cases is basically like the basis of everything we live in today.
Oh,
So
interesting.
That's the stuff we're reading right now. Okay, this has never been overturned. It's never even been touched. It's never even been breathed on. And this is from 1873, right?
Hmm.
So there's two different versions of United States. For example, if you go to how many constitutions are there for California? One from 1849 and one from 1879. That makes perfect sense. There's two different states of California. One before the incorporation of the federal government and one after the incorporation of the federal government. This one is unincorporated. This one is incorporated. This one is where there are people and men and freemen of the Union. This one is where you have persons, individuals and natural persons and trusts and corporations and estates and partnerships, etc.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that helps clarify it because it's like, wait, what's going on here? So that was kind of a line that was drawn in the sand between when our nation we were more free and when citizen actually meant what it's supposed to mean. And then after you cross that line in the sand of the timeline of our history as a country, essentially, then it turned everything commercial. And that's then when we have all of these rules and regulations and the tax, the voluntary tax payment system that we pay into that I think, a lot of people have a lot of complaints about.
Yeah, the tax system is totally irrelevant. I mean, it's so I know people are stuck in that. I use that a lot in my paid ads and stuff because it's a hot thing. But when you start to understand this information, the tax stuff is just so it's so irrelevant.
Well,
We'll
and it's
talk about
crazy
it.
because I feel like it's so ingrained in our minds from that line in the sand, timeline wise, all the generations after that, like even my parents, God bless their souls, I talk to them about this sometimes, and they are so ingrained that like that is the way it's supposed to be, and that's the right way, and our taxes pay for all these things. And I'm like, yo, our taxes are going to Ukraine, or at least they were before,
Your
the
taxes
presidents
are
get on
not going to
stage.
Ukraine.
Well, I just mean that like the government is not actually
The taxes go to the International Monetary Fund. They are siphoned out of the country.
right. What I mean to say by that is that like they're not actually being used for us. We pay in our
Yes,
taxes
that's correct.
thinking that it's going to benefit us in some way because we're using public, you know, uh decencies or whatever, but we are not actually benefiting from it.
So if you want to we'll get into taxes more later because it's just, I know it's a big thing, but we have to understand more about the history before we can get into taxes smoothly, right? Um, if you're a sole proprietorship, which is a person, and you're living in the 1879 version of state of California, you would have a state and federal tax liability. If you are a man or free man in the unincorporated version of state of California, which is considered a state of the union, that has absolutely nothing to do with you. But the thing is that there's a lot of information involving what I teach where they say, oh, you can't mix public and private. You can't have them both. You can't do all these different things. I've never seen anything that makes that true. And I'm probably the only person out there that says that not only do they mix, but you need to mix them constantly. And they're basically, you want to operate in both of them all the time. You're basically like a gigantic person being, and you have one leg in the private and you have one leg in the public. You don't have to do it that way. Yes, there's a lot of information out there where you can exit the public entirely. Get rid of your driver's license. Get rid of your don't ever mention your social security number, or it's not yours. Don't ever mention the social security number or tax identification number of the sole proprietorship ever again, unless you're referring only to the sole proprietorship. Get rid of your license plates. I mean, to some degree, if you really want to be a purist, get rid of your bank accounts, but that's a whole nother story. So the way I look at it is you can operate in both because when you start to understand the financial system, you can operate in the public and you can have literally access to like infinite currency. You can start operating as a bank in the public, and then you can also operate in the private at the same time, right? So if we start to inject a little bit of financial information into this, right? We basically we have this thing. We've already talked about registered owner, right? What's a registered owner? Registered owner is the individual who, well, let's back up even farther. What's owner? Owner is somebody with some sort of interest, financial interest in something, right?
Hmm.
So if we go back to my flow chart and we go to owner, right? So owner is essentially a trustee or a beneficiary, right? So they assume you are the trustee of the sole proprietorship. If you want to boil down the entire assumption, that is like the spinal cord of everything that happens in the public, is you have this thing called the sole proprietorship. You're considered the owner of that sole proprietorship. And within the subsection of the definition of owner, you're assumed to not be the beneficiary of the sole proprietorship. You're assumed to be the trustee of the sole proprietorship, which makes you responsible for the debts of the sole proprietorship. That is the debt system. And then you start going into 20 CFR 422.104 real quick. We'll start getting into some financial information. CFR 422.104. We have this section called Who Can Be Assigned a Social Security Number. We can assign you a Social Security number if you meet the evidence requirements in 422.107. Now, shockingly, thank God for Cornell, because Cornell links these into the actual statute, which is why I like Cornell. Plus, it's visually the easiest one, in my opinion, to read and understand. And I actually am a monthly donor to Cornell, actually, as of recently. I'm very proud to do that. So we have the definition of the word you has a special definition. We're going to click on that. And we're going to see here, this comes from 20 Code of Federal Regulations, section 422.402. You means an individual who owes a debt to the United States within the scope of this subpart.
What?
So what they're saying is, in layman terms, what they're saying is there's this thing called a sole proprietorship that has a social security number. That thing is an individual who owes a debt to the United States. You are the owner of that thing. They assume you are the trustee, so thus you, by extension, owe a debt to the United States.
What? For nothing. Like you don't even have to have activity. You as a being just owe a debt to the United States.
And that's why everything's becoming so commercialized. That's why you have to pay to eat and live. And if you don't make money, you just die on the side of the street alone. That's why. Because the thing is, think about 200 years ago. You could just go on the beach and eat mangoes, and you didn't need to. There was this commercial insanity didn't exist. This whole commercial insanity is part of this gigantic beast that's based off of commercial ideas getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and everyone identifying with a sole proprietorship. No one knows that there's this thing, this business, and everyone assumes that when they get a letter from the IRS and it's got your name in all capital letters, they're talking to you. They aren't talking to you at all. They're talking to the sole proprietorship, and they assume you are the owner and trustee. When you respond like the owner or trustee, it makes that assumption true in law.
What? Oh my God. That's insane.
That's how it works. They're making it's called a presentment. They're not sending you. Well, we can get into all the financial stuff. That's a whole nother conversation.
I know there's so much.
So really, it gets a lot simpler because you think to yourself, "Oh, I'm in a slave system." Well, you're not at all. Actually, it's actually a bit of a joke because when you start to get into so here is an original quote from the so we have the 1911, 1913. That was the time period when we have the Federal Reserve Act. From 1913, if you start looking at a lot of old court cases and stuff from the 1800s, they had a term called specie, like species, but the singular version of that specie, right? Specie means gold and silver coin. It means what I have in my hand here and I have all over my desk because I collect all sorts of old Confederate notes and and gold backs. I have these things called. This is pretty cool. People are into these gold backs, and I have gold coins. I have all this different types of bonds and securities, and all. Kind of like an immersion thing. It's part of my learning, the way I learn, right? So gold coins. A buddy of mine prints silver coins in different artistic types. I have all these different silver
Cool.
coins, right? So in 1933, we have the Emergency Banking Act and the Gold Abrogation Act. So between 1913 and 1933, we have gold certificates, silver certificates, gold coins, silver coins, Federal Reserve notes, bank notes. There's all these different types of currencies, right? Because the United States worked before 1871 was every single state was its own country, just like the European Union.
Mm.
America, United States is literally the same exact thing as the European Union. You can call the United States, and you can call the European Union United States. You can call the United States United Nations. You wouldn't capitalize it. Lowercase u, lowercase n. It's a bunch of United Nations.
Hmm.
It's a bunch of United States.
So prior,
The European Union is a bunch of United States. The
right.
European Union is a bunch of United Nations. So prior to
Interesting.
1871, all the states were all independent countries. They still are to this day. The problem is that all the incorporated versions of all the states, such as state of California, the governor is Gavin Newsom. State of California is also a corporation located in the District of Columbia. That's why you have every single state, most of them, not all of them, they have two different constitutions, or some of them have five or six, but you'll see that a lot of them have two. One from before the 14th Amendment and one from after the 14th Amendment, just like we have here in California. California is really simple.
Hmm.
California has an original non incorporated version, which is the 1949 Constitution, and it still exists even to this day. And then you have the incorporated 1871 version, which is located in the District of Columbia and is a business.
Hmm.
And you can go on Dun and Bradstreet and you can look up the business directory for state of California. If we go to my law firm website and we go to the questions and answers page, we type in state of California. Here's the Dun and Bradstreet business listing for the business called State of California.
Wow. Proof's in the pudding.
So we have two different types of State of California. We have the business, and then we have the actual political state,
And
right?
so what is that meaning for us as people, or yeah, us as people and as
So
operating in that?
people don't live in the business.
Hmm.
So when you start talking about guys in my arena, and they start talking about you don't mix the private and the public, that's what they don't realize they're trying to say. They don't understand that. They don't realize they what they're saying is that the private man or free man of the union cannot reside or live inside of a business called State of California. That's true. But the thing is that that's not what actually occurs. When you say Brandon Joe Williams is a resident of State of California, they'll never ever list your name in upper and lowercase letters. They always list your name in all uppercase letters. They assume you're talking about the sole proprietorship. They won't let the public and the private mix either. The public and the private physically cannot mix. They won't let it happen. You can't
Hmm.
do it. So people are like, "Oh, you can't mix the public and the private." You couldn't do it if you wanted to. You
Okay.
couldn't
And
you
so,
if you had bombs strapped to your chest and two Uzis in both hands, and you're like, I'm gonna die trying to mix the private and the public, you're gonna die because it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna work, right? You
so
write
what
your
you're
if
saying is
you write
that
your name, you could write a 450 page manifesto talking about how you are the private man or free man of the union, and you hereby swear under penalty of perjury, lock me up and throw away the key, that I live and I reside in the business called State of California. And they're just going to ignore all of that. They're going to list your name as all capital letters, and they're going to say it's sole proprietorship.
Okay.
Can't
So
be done.
the implication of that is that what you're saying is that you don't have to do anything in order to be in the private because you already are, and then your sole proprietorship is already in the public and they're already separated by acknowledgement from the government.
They always have been.
And so then what does that mean as somebody like me? What is the implication of that?
The implication is that you just have to realize that they gave you a business so you can operate in commerce. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, the registered owner part of this, right? So the way they look at it is, and they don't realize this, no one realizes this, the DMV has no clue about any of this. You are the executor, and you entered into a trust contract with a business called State of California, and you gave them res, which is the asset. Remember, there has to be some kind of asset or res in the trust. You
Mm-hmm.
gave them res. The res was an automobile, but now it's a motor vehicle. They listed the person who is the primary, the person who has the rights to the profits associated with operating that automobile in commerce, making it a motor vehicle, is the registered owner. The registered owner is not you as the man or freeman of the union. It's the sole proprietorship identified by the social security number.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The way they look at it is you, as the owner, were the executor of this trust contract. You paid for it. You signed up for it. You filled out the application. You didn't have to go to the DMV ever. You drove all the way down there and you waited in line in a shitty building with a bunch of horrible people working there. I'm sorry. And you paid. You paid money. So the thing is that when you really realize how this works, it's beyond voluntary. If you traveled across the world and you traveled through forests and in beat up jeeps and you fought off pirates and on boats to go and eat mangoes in some foreign land, and then you get there and you eat the mangoes and you say, "I was forced to eat this mango," they're gonna look at you and they're gonna be like, "Bro,
Yeah.
you spent a whole fucking day and you spent hundreds of dollars to enter into a contract that you never had to do anything with or involve yourself at all whatsoever. You donated essentially your vehicle to the state as res to enter into a commercial contract. That commercial contract allows you or permits you to operate that vehicle on the highways for some kind of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, as we saw already from the definition of used for commercial purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you are the one who willingly, beyond willingly, you waited, you drove, you studied, you paid to enter into a commercial trust contract with a business called State of California.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's what people need to understand. You're the one who did it. You're the one who went there. You're the one who waited in line. You're the one who paid. You're the one who signed the documentation. Now, were you tricked and lied and all this kind of goofy stuff? I mean, yeah, to some degree you were. I mean, it says registered owner, and you could have come online and typed in what's the definition of registered owner? What's the definition of certificate of title?
Uh-huh.
You know, you could have typed all these things in. If you go to the DMV or if you write up a bill of sale and tell the DMV that, you know, you no longer own the car or the car is going into a private trust, and you go into your door frame and you tear the VIN number out of the door frame and then you cover up, you could take a piece of wood or something and glue it in where the VIN number is on your dashboard. They can look down in through the windshield and they can see your VIN number.
Mm-hmm.
You can stick something in there and glue it. You can, and then if you open the door, the driver's side door, there's a little plaque inside the driver's side door that has the VIN number. You could take a flathead screwdriver, you can jam it in there, you can rip that thing out of there. If they can't see the VIN number and there's no longer any certificate of title, you've officially moved your vehicle into the private.
And then what would the consequences be of that, if any?
Well, there's pros and cons. So, for example, if we go back to the flow chart, right? This is I'm not going to try to find it right now. It's kind of a pain in the ass to find it, but every single word, the capitalization and everything is exactly perfect. I was very, very specific about this. If we go to the House Congressional Record during the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, this is a key quote that they talk about how this new money, quote unquote, will work. When they took away all the gold and they converted everything over to Federal Reserve notes and bank notes and promissory notes. Under the new law, the money is issued to the banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances. The money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. Now, here's the most important part. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation.
What?
So Federal Reserve notes represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. You've donated your vehicle when you enter into a trust contract for commercially, meaning get a certificate of title. You're donating that vehicle to be part of the representation of what is called the full faith and credit of the United States, and it becomes part of the collateral that's pushed up against the public debt. So your car, you donated your car, and it's now collateralized under the public debt if you have a certificate of title.
So they've basically taken it as they own it because the title's in the state's name, the corporation. So they
well,
own
that's the
it.
thing. That the word own or ownership is much more complicated than people think. Ownership means there's a security interest. How much security interest, what kind of security interest, a trustee security interest, a beneficiary security interest, a partial security interest. A certificate of title shows a beneficial interest only in the profits associated with using that asset commercially. So yeah, you are the owner. Oh, who's the owner? I'm the owner. You think that means absolute ownership, which is a term,
Right.
absolute ownership. That's not what they're talking about. And that's not what you're talking about. They're asking you who's the registered owner, who's the person who has the rights over the profits of the use of this res in a commercial capacity. I am. The thing is that that's the conversation taking place. The police officer doesn't realize that's the conversation taking place, and you also don't realize that's the conversation taking place. He says, "Are you the registered owner of this motor vehicle?" He doesn't realize he's asking you, do you have, or is your sole proprietorship listed as the individual who has the right to the profit or dividend associated with using this a commercial vehicle in a commercial manner, which I'm assuming you're doing right now because you have a driver's license that you presented to me, which shows that you must be operating this vehicle right now in commerce because a driver is somebody who operates a commercial motor vehicle. And you're saying yes to all the above.
Right. So if you were to say no to that,
Correct.
those consequences that we were talking about, what would that be?
Well, no to what? What are you saying no to?
Well, if you were to say no to the fact that you weren't the driver and you didn't have a driver's license and you took the VIN numbers off of the car and
well, hold
all
on.
that.
A lot of people say they aren't a driver, but they present a driver's license.
Right. So if you didn't present a driver's license, like
good. Okay, good. So that's
yes,
good. So
yes,
that
so
one,
you didn't
so
present that.
that's
You
good.
covered
That,
up the
check
VINs.
that box. Okay,
Yeah.
check that box. Yes. Now, is there a certificate of title on said automobile / motor vehicle?
Well, let's say for sake of argument, no, that you got rid of it somehow.
Good. Okay, good. We have another check box.
Uh-huh.
What if he says that you're operating something?
Well, you would say that you are, don't they like traveling? Traveling is a
Well, that's going to get you pegged as a sovereign citizen, and then he's going to pull you out of the car and go fucking ballistic. Maybe, maybe.
Right.
I feel
we
like
haven't talked about the difference between the sovereign citizen thing.
That word, you're rolling the dice. You're rolling the emotional dice. If you say I'm not a driver, I'm a traveler, you're rolling the emotional dice. I don't like to roll the emotional dice.
Right. No, yeah, you're very grounded.
I think of it like a lawsuit. They make an assumption. You're a driver. I say, no, I'm not. What proof do you have? do you assume that I'm transporting this for some sort of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration? Is that there's not a whole lot in the car, officer? What do you assume is in the car? There's no persons in the car. If there was another person, I would say, hey, Jim, tell this officer, am I transporting you for any fee, rate, charge, or other consideration? No, officer, he is not transported. Okay, good. So what else in this, what you think is a motor vehicle, what do you believe is here? Because the thing is, they need a search warrant to search the trunk. Let's say you were transporting this for some sort of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, but it was in the fucking trunk. I have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I don't need to tell him about that. He needs a search warrant to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say he got a search warrant. He searched my trunk. He found this, and he says, oh, aha. What do we have here? A bottle. Now, let's say, for example, I was transporting said bottle for some sort of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration. He has to prove that. I'm not telling him shit. Mm-hmm. Now, if he finds the bottle and then he finds a receipt of transport, and on the receipt of transport, it says, will be transported by Brandon Joe Williams between the hours of 3 to 6 p.m. on December 3rd, 2024, in said car, Shelby GT500 with license plate number, blah, blah, blah. That's when you're fucked. Now he's got you.
Right.
That's how much work it takes when you understand the terminology and you don't waive your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. That's how much he's going to need to have to charge you for a traffic infraction. That's how far he's going to need to take it.
Got it. Okay.
If he says, are you a driver? Are you driving a motor vehicle? Yes, I am, officer, driver's license. He doesn't need to do any of that anymore.
Because you've already given permission to say.
You've already incriminated yourself. You've already completely signed up. You're a driver, which means you're operating a commercial motor vehicle. You have a motor vehicle, which means that a vehicle is being operated for some sort of commerce on the highways for some sort of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration. He doesn't even necessarily need to find what property or cargo or persons that you're transporting for what kind of fee, rate, charge, or other consideration. You've already confessed.
Right.
It's a confession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're basically handing over all of the things that he needs in order to give you the consequences that are according to the law.
Correct. You don't see sheriffs pulling people over very often. That's always police. That's because the police is on the commercial side.
Mm-hmm.
The sheriffs are on the union side. That's why there's two different. That's why there's two different police forces. If you go out in the middle of Texas to an unincorporated city, you won't find a police force. There's only a sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. You will only find a police force in incorporated cities and counties.
Yeah, I was researching the other day. I pulled up this tiny little town in Montana, and on the actual Apple Maps, it said unincorporated community. And I screenshotted it. I was like, oh my gosh, there's
unincorporated communities. There's unincorporated communities all over the place. I think right outside of Joshua Tree, or even Joshua Tree itself. I remember we were in Joshua Tree, and there was these like fucking dirt roads that looked like crazy as fuck. And I was like, pull down the dirt road, pull on the dirt. And we were driving down these dirt roads, and you'll see literal signs, unincorporated county of blah, blah, blah. All properties are private. Please be careful, blah, blah, blah. And then all the properties that start, they have these signs out front. No trespassing. Trespassers will be shot, blah, 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 blah. And I did a video. Oh, this is the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's just like right here, right outside of LA, a Joshua Tree area, right? So there are a lot of, now what's crazy is the thing that nobody ever asks. An incorporation is a juristic person. An incorporation is a legal fiction. An incorporation doesn't really exist in the physical world. It's not part of the physical plane. It's like saying a soul or a spirit. Mm-hmm. So just because a quote unquote city is incorporated doesn't mean that that incorporated aspect of the city is now the geographic coordinates of what the people believe the location of the city to be. That's the part that's so goofy. The fact that the city is incorporated or not incorporated is actually, when you really get down to it, completely irrelevant, because an incorporation has no physical location.
Right.
So the thing is that's all. That's like saying, "Oh, I'm a spirit. I'm in Montana right now." Okay.
Hmm.
And then like 5 minutes later, oh, I'm a spirit. I'm in Texas. Look at me. My spirit's got spirit cowboy boots and a spirit cowboy hat. That's what
Yeah.
that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with in the incorporated world is the spirit is the same thing as saying it's almost like the satanic version of like the spirit world. It's
Mm.
like it has no bearing in the physical world. So when they say that the United States is located in the District of Columbia, the next logical question is, okay, where in the District of Columbia? I've never seen ever anyone ever answer that question, and I've never seen a definition anywhere.
Hmm.
I don't think there is a definition, and the reason why is because they just said it. They just say it. My spirit's in fucking Texas.
Right.
So that's the whole thing that people don't really understand. So you take this quote from talking about how the money will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people of the nation. And then you go online and you look at 18 USC 8. Now we have the real bombshell here. This is what we have circa 2024. We have 18 USC 8.
Wow.
Obligation or other security of the United States defined. The term obligation or other security of the United States includes all bonds, certificates of indebtedness, national bank currency, Federal Reserve notes, which is what's in your wallet. It's not money, it's currency. Federal Reserve banknotes, coupons, United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates, silver certificates, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks, drafts. So, what are they saying? They're saying that anything that's commercial that's located in the public is a obligation or other security of the United States. So you asked me in terms of public and private, where do you want to be? I can't answer that question for you. The problem is this. If something's in the public, for example, if you're paying property taxes and your property is listed underneath the county. By the way, County of Los Angeles is also a business located in the District of Columbia.
Mm.
So when you
Shocking.
so when you list that property as being a property underneath that business, you're essentially listing that property as being located in the District of Columbia. And people say, "Well, how can that be?" It's very, very simple. Title 8, Section 1101 has the definition of the word naturalization. Naturalization is the secret to all of this information. Uh, Title 8 USC 1101 subsection A23. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. The definition of the word person means an individual or an organization. The word individual means a sole proprietorship.
Mhm. Right. Okay.
So the term person means a sole proprietorship or an organization. If we go back to Title 8, Section 1101, and we go down to subsection 28, we have the definition of organization as used in the definition of person. Let me find that for you. I think it's 28. Oh, see if it's 20. Where in the hell is 28? Let's see. 28. If we can't find it, I will do a find feature and we will find it rapidly. Let's see. Organization.
Just gonna turn on my light really quick.
Good to see your pretty face even more clearly now.
I know. I don't know why I didn't turn my light on before. It just was right at that hour where it gets dark here.
Your teeth are just like mine. That's why. You have big, beautiful teeth.
Yes, they are very, very big. I call them like beaver teeth.
Yeah,
Makes for a big smile.
I always laugh because as a kid I got made fun of a lot, and then now everyone's jealous. So it's like you had to kind of go through that as a kid, but like now we're good to go, you know?
Oh yes, yes, we grew into them.
All right, so 8 USC 1101 subsection A28 has the definition of the word organization. The term organization means, but is not limited to, an organization. I love it when they use the same word. It fucking pisses me off so much. Uh, but is not limited to an organization, corporation, company, partnership, association, trust, foundation, or fund, and includes a group of persons, whether or not incorporated permanently or temporarily associated together with joint action on any subject or subjects. So really, I can't think of anything in the planet ever that wouldn't fit in the definition here.
Yeah.
It's literally anything,
So vague.
anywhere, anything, whether or not it's incorporated or not, it doesn't matter. It's just literally anything, anywhere, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we go back to the definition of the word person and we want to reread this, the term person means a sole proprietorship or anything. That's kind of the way I look at it, honestly, to tell you the truth. That's sort of like that's basically the way I read this, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if we reread this with that in mind, the term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a sole proprietorship or anything else ever after birth by any means whatsoever.
Right. It's almost like it has no meaning because it's such a vague meaning.
That's correct. The definition of the word definition means a limitation or boundaries of meaning. So when
Mm.
something is so limitless, it actually isn't really a definition by definition.
Right.
So, for example, if you were suing the Department of State because you didn't get a passport that you wanted or something like that, you could actually bring that up. The person means individual or organization, and the definition of organization is not a definition. You would throw the biggest goddamn wrench into the fucking lawyers over at the Department of State they've ever seen in their entire fucking life, right?
Right.
So this is kind of what I do, right? So now we have the definition of the word state, right? So state is sort of where I usually get into the this whole kind of what's the definition of state and kind of that kind of thing, right? So if we go to these are definitions that I've culled together. In its largest sense, a state is a body politic or society of men.
And for those of you just listening auditorily, he's on his own nation's website, the amnestycoalition.org.
So what is a body politic? State or nation or public association. So we're starting to see that state and nation mean the same thing. So what is so then I kept digging. Okay, so I get it. A state's a nation, but I still don't understand what a state is. I don't know what a body politic is. So I finally figured it out. I found this definition from a court case. Boom, it blew the whole thing wide open, right? We have what is the definition of a nation or a state? It's the same word. Definition is as follows. An independent body politic, a society of men united together for the purpose of promoting their mutual safety and advantage by the joint efforts of their combined strength. But every combination of men who govern themselves independently of all others will not be considered a nation. A body of pirates, for example, who govern themselves are not a nation. To constitute a nation, another ingredient is required. The body thus formed must respect other nations in general and each of their members in particular. Such a society has her affairs and her interests. She deliberates and takes resolutions in common, thus becoming a moral person who possesses an understanding and will peculiar to herself and is susceptible of obligations and rights. So this is kind of where you're also seeing the definition of the word person.
Right. Okay.
The definition of the word nation, state, person kind of all mean the same thing. It's a bunch of individual people operating as one person.
Got it.
They have to be kind of like society has her interests, deliberates, takes resolutions in common, and is moral, possesses an understanding, and is susceptible of obligations and rights, right? So people ask and people say, oh, well, a corporation can't be a nation. That's not true. A corporation can be a nation. And that's why State of California, the incorporated version, exists as a nation. How do you select which nation you're going to be a part of? Conferring the nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. So again, it's all voluntary. You say, I, uppercase, lower, and lowercase Brandon Joe Williams, am a resident of state of California. Public and private don't mix. So they translate that into the sole proprietorship, which is a person called all caps Brandon Joe Williams is a resident of the nation, state, or
Mm-hmm.
business, however you want to say it, business, nation, state, called state of California. The sad part is you never were referring to a sole proprietorship, and the sad part is that the state of California is basically inside the District of Columbia. So you said I, meaning the man or free man of the union. They translated that unknowingly, even to them, to sole proprietorship. That's not what you were trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And they say state of California. Just because a business is named state of California does not mean it's located in the state of California. State of
Mm-hmm.
California could be located somewhere out in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It just so happens the business, which just so happens to have a trade name that has this S and this T and this A and this T and this E, and you assume all these things. It just so happens that that corporation, which doesn't really have any location even in the physical universe at all, even to begin with, so to even say that it's located in the District of Columbia is kind of hilarious, but that's what they say, is
Mm-hmm.
located in the District of Columbia. How can, if a corporation is located at a certain coordinates out in the sea somewhere, how could anyone ever prove that in a court of law?
Right. Okay, so the being in the public part is voluntary. So we've established that, right?
Yeah, everything's voluntary, but yes.
Everything's voluntary, yes. So if you were to do what you're saying, where you can operate in the private and in the public, how would you do that? Given the fact that we are all in a system where we're voluntarily operating in the public, how do we do both?
There are two different beings. In my world, there are actually three different beings. I'm not even sure if being is the right word. So you have, as far as I'm concerned, you start getting into the spiritual end. You have the physical body that is being used as an interface into the physical world. Then you have the creative essence of the individual, which I would personally, because of my religious beliefs of being a Scientologist, I believe that the creative entity is an entirely different, separatable person, I guess you could say. So in my own world, there are two individuals in the private and one individual in the public.
Okay.
So in my world, in my own personal world, which I wouldn't necessarily do this in a court case,
Mm-hmm.
but in my own personal world, we have three different things we need to talk about. We have the essence of creativity, right? Then we have the physical body, which is also a living organism, and then we have the sole proprietorship.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So as far as
So
I'm
when
concerned, there's three different things to talk about, but that's not. I don't talk about it that way in the court cases. I talk about just there's just two things.
So just to simplify it for people, if we were talking about it in the sense of like the court cases, how do you live in both? What do you do or not do? Like if somebody like me wanted to live more in the private, if you will, or didn't want to participate or volunteer in the public, how would I go about doing that?
Well, the thing about the public that people don't understand is that people are under the assumption that because you are assumed to be this trustee owner of this sole proprietorship, and because you're the trustee owner of this sole proprietorship, you now have all these tax liabilities and all these liabilities. The thing is that that is also false. And the reason why that's false is because this is the part where we start getting into what is money, right? So if I start clearing up um, some of these windows, we can get into how that works, right? So what is what people think is money? It's not money at
So,
all.
so is money really the thing that kind of ties us together with
Yes.
volunteering,
Well, it's not money,
volunteering
it's
for the
currency, but
public
yeah, it's negotiable
currency?
instruments. It's not money.
So that's what ties us as the private version of us And it forces us almost to have to volunteer in the public. It's currency that does
You
that.
believe
Or you
you
believe.
are under the
Yeah, we
false
have a belief.
assumption. Yes, you are. The false assumption is that you are the trustee owner on behalf of the sole proprietorship. Thus, if the sole proprietorship has debts, you are liable for those debts. And then the sole proprietorship has been pushed up against the public debt using the Social Security Act, which is what we saw earlier. The definition of you means a person who owes a debt to the United States as part of the subpart.
Mm-hmm.
The whole
Right.
assumption, so the whole connecting point between you as a man, free man of the union, and the public person, natural person, individual sole proprietorship is this assumption that you are liable for the debts of the sole proprietorship. That's
And what's
correct.
actually the truth of that if that's the lie?
The truth is that yes, you can willingly. I understand the fact that there is an assumption that I am responsible for the debts associated with my sole proprietorship. I choose willingly at this point of 4:37 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on December 3rd, 2024 to continue to operate in that manner willingly and openly. I have no issues with that situation. And the reason why is because we start getting into the work. How do negotiable instruments operate?
Hang on,
So
wait, but before we get into that, how would we explain what the real truth is
the real truth
against the
is,
lie
I'll
that
I'll explain that, but we have to go into it deeper to explain that, right?
okay, okay.
So negotiable instruments. So there is this assumption that the sole proprietorship owes this vague thing called what you think is Federal Reserve notes. That's not really what they're asking you for. Okay.
Well, to the layperson who doesn't know what a Federal Reserve note is, though, that's just money, like a dollar bill, $20
That's what's in
bill.
your wallet. That's what you
Yeah,
think is money. It's not money.
right,
It's a
right.
negotiable instrument, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is a negotiable instrument? A negotiable instrument is basically, and I created this flow chart. A negotiable instrument is basically a security. If you want to keep it simple, it's not totally what it is, but it's damn close. It's pretty much the same thing. So think of like Wall Street, like what they're throwing around on Wall Street is what's in your wallet. It's the same fucking thing. Federal
Mm-hmm.
Reserve note and a stock or bond for some big corporation or financial institution, it's the same thing. Okay. So if that's the case, then what is a negotiable instrument? If you look at UCC Article 3, Section 104, without getting into it, you can go and look up all of these. I have many of them. I have the original sections that you can go look at for yourself listed, right? But we'll just keep it simple. So it breaks down into two different possibilities. You have an unconditional promise to pay, which is called a promissory note or note for short. And then you have an unconditional order to pay, which is called a bill. You get bills in the mail for your utility bill, your phone bill, your credit card bill. So bill is a shortening of the term bill of exchange. A bill or a bill of exchange in the Uniform Commercial Code or in the California Commercial Code is actually not called a bill or bill of exchange. It's called a draft.
Mm.
So the term to say unconditional promise to pay, to say bill, to say bill of exchange, or to say draft, you're all referring to the same thing. All means
Okay.
that all those terms and words all mean the same thing.
Okay.
On the other side, we have an unconditional promise to pay or promissory note or note. Those three things mean it's the same thing. You're saying the same thing. It's all the same terminology, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Examples of a promissory note is when you sign for a traffic ticket, a loan. When you get a loan, you promise to pay on that. All credit card transactions, you're promising to pay the transaction using the credit card. Every single individual credit card transaction is a micro promissory note. Federal Reserve notes are also promissory notes. Basically, every currency in a central bank is all promissory notes. They aren't money, they're currency, they're promissory notes. Insurance policies
So
are
to
promissory
contrast
notes.
that, like a gold coin would be considered money, but
Specie, money.
specie money, but a dollar bill is considered a Federal Reserve note, which is considered an
Well,
unconditional promise
hold
to
on.
pay.
The word dollar, the original definition of the word dollar has to do with weight.
Mm.
100 cents means 100 fractions of an ounce or something like that.
Okay.
So the word dollar has to do with specie. The word dollar has nothing to do with a Federal Reserve note or a negotiable instrument. So you wouldn't
Okay.
use the word dollar. You wouldn't use the word money. If you look up the
Hmm.
definition of the word money, it says right in the definition does not include promissory note, bill of exchange, or other evidences of debt. I think is
Got
almost
it.
word for word what it says in the definition, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So the definition of money would only be specie. Now,
Okay.
it says paper currency, but the paper currency would have to be directly attached to specie. So a gold certificate or a silver certificate would barely fit the definition of the word money. Barely.
But a gold coin or a silver coin would
100%.
fit
That is
money.
money. Clear as day, clear as a bell. What is money in its clearest sense? It's gold and silver coins. What is money in its less clear sense? A gold or silver certificate, which is paper that is directly exchangeable for gold and silver. What would not be included in the definition of money? Bills of exchange, bonds, coupons, banknotes. I could go on for an hour and list literally almost everything
Yeah.
we see in this world. All of those things would not be included in the definition of the word money.
Including the paper stuff that we exchange that we think is money, but it's not.
Most people listening to this have probably never had money, never seen money, never touched money, and never used any of it.
Hmm.
So we can see that very clearly in UCC 3-102. We have subject matter. This is pretty mind blowing. This article applies to negotiable instruments. It does not apply to money.
Hmm. Wow.
We are not talking about money. There's no money anywhere. You don't have any money. There are some people now, especially conservative people, that are getting gold and silver coins and putting them in their safes in their basement and stuff like that. That's money.
Right.
Everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, all your credit card transactions have nothing to do with money. Your debit card transactions have nothing to do with money. Your paper checks have nothing to do with money. Your Federal Reserve notes have nothing to do with money. If you have investments in an options or bonds, commodities, any sort of trading that may happen, cryptocurrencies, titles for cars, titles for property, all that, none of that is money.
Hmm.
Most people in today's world live their entire life without ever having anything to do with money. They never contact money. They're never talking about money. They never hold any money. They never use any money to exchange for anything else. And they live their entire life only and exclusively dealing with negotiable instruments. And they never realize it from cradle to grave.
Right. Which wasn't the case back in the day. Because
No,
when we went off of the gold standard, that's when this like imaginary negotiable instrument, I'll promise to pay you and I'll put an order to pay here, was invented essentially, right?
correct. So in 1911, 1913, we had the Federal Reserve Act, but we still had specie. We still had gold and silver certificates up until 1933 with the Emergency Banking Act. And then the Federal Reserve notes were still vaguely tied to gold all the way up until 1971. 1971 was the final fatality, the Mortal Kombat fatality
Ah,
of bringing our financial system to fiat, meaning backed by nothing, essentially entirely, right?
right, right.
Now they say that the fiat monetary system is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. When they say that, they're talking about this so-called mortgage on all of the properties and all of the assets of everyone in the nation.
Mm, okay.
That's the definition of the term full faith and credit of the United States. And they run that whole system of the full faith and credit of the United States through the Social Security system. If you were to rename the Social Security system the sole proprietorship system, everything would make perfect sense to you.
Wow. Wow. Dang. Wow.
Now let me ask you a question. When was the Emergency Banking Act? I've already
Is
said that
that,
like 8 times. I want to see
I
if you.
mean, I mean, I have a trauma brain slash I had
It's
no,
okay. If you
it's
keep
an excuse.
smiling, I'll just forget anyways. I won't mind. 1933.
1933. Ah, I
Now,
almost had it.
when was the Social Security Act? Ding ding ding.
uh, I thought that that was in the 30s because I was thinking about Great Depression, like
Yes,
bank
when in the
crashing.
30s?
35?
Ah, ding ding ding.
Yes.
1935.
Yes.
So we have coming off of the gold standard and then them going, "Oh shit. Well, what are we going to back the dollar with?" That's the solution.
Oh,
Like a year and a
interesting.
half later, and they were probably, I don't know all the detail, I would need to dig through all of the congressional records. They were probably working on the Social Security Act that entire time. So even though the Social Security Act was released in 1935, you bet your ass they were probably working on it even before the Emergency Banking Act or even during the Emergency Bank. I wouldn't be surprised if in the Emergency Banking Act they're talking about a system that may not have a name yet, and then it took them a year and a half to put it all together, and then they released it as the Social Security Act. And if you look at the original Social Security cards,
Well, now, wasn't this part of Roosevelt's New Deal after the banks crashed in 1929? Is this
yeah,
kind of a similar
yeah.
this is of the similar body of work? I'm trying to figure out like was there actually an intention behind trying to save our economy or were they did they intentionally do this?
Well, here's what they changed this pretty rapidly, but this is what an original 1936 Social Security card, first year the cards were issued.
Wow.
So you see that there's an account number. So it's an account,
Hmm.
okay? And then you see employees signature.
Wow.
They took some of these words off pretty fast. People
I
were asking too
bet.
many questions.
I bet they were.
So we know that it creates some sort of an account, and we know that it has something to do with being an employee of something.
Mm.
Without having to get into the Social Security Act and dig through shit and all that. This is like easy peasy. It's an account, and it's associated with some sort of employee. What's an employee? We can get into the definitions, but the simple fact of employee, it fits the Commerce Clause. That's all we need. As long
Hmm.
as it fits the Commerce Clause, we have plenary power.
Wow. Basically meaning that the federal government has power over you.
Full, unmitigated
Full.
power. Plenary
Wow.
power. Plenary power.
So they invented the Social Security Act, 1935. That gave the federal government full
Plenary
plenary
power.
power. Okay, that's what you were saying in the beginning of our
Plenary
chat.
power refers to the complete or absolute authority granted to a governing body over a specific area without limitations, enabling them to exercise significant control and discretion over relevant matters.
Whoa. Okay, that has a whole new meaning for me from the beginning of our chat. I was like, wait, what are we talking about here? But that now it's like it's all clicking. I'm getting it.
Commerce clause. It's all based on the Commerce Clause. If you're talking through a sole proprietorship, they have plenary power. If you're talking as the man free man of the union, not only do they not have plenary power, they have no power and actually no jurisdiction at all whatsoever, both subject matter, territorial, and personal jurisdiction. They have zilch.
Wow. Wow. Oh my
So the
gosh.
sole proprietorship shifts the situation from zero control, not minimal control, not slight control, not lower medium control, not 1 out of 10 control, hard zero, hard solid nothing to a complete and utter explosive 10 out of 10 control.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, whoa. So 1935 Social Security Act came into place. That gave them plenary power over the sole proprietorship, which we have been conflated as beings to be the same of, but we are not.
They assume it because they don't know, and then we assume it because we don't know. So it's
Right.
it's 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 misunderstandings on both sides of the equation.
Got it. But do you think that the Social Security Act people who created that back in the 30s, did they know this?
Probably.
Like, were they
Maybe,
doing this intentionally? I mean, we would never know for sure, but
maybe, probably. I don't know. Who knows?
so if we were to act as if we were the free man of the union, then we wouldn't be subject to their plenary power and they wouldn't, what would that do for us then?
Well, if you have a bank account or you use a credit card or you use a debit card or you write checks, if you look on your checkbook when you write a check where you sign your name, it says authorized signature. Check picture. So if we look at a picture of a check, and you can pull out your checkbooks for people watching this, it's pretty shocking. If you pull out your checkbooks and you look at the line right here where you sign, checkbook author. Um, let's see if we can find a photo here. There we go. So you can see it real clear here, but if you look at on your checkbook, go ahead and pull a checkbook out of your closet when you're watching the show, and you'll see there'll be a line, and it doesn't typically say this term authorized signature here, but you'll see there's a little MP, M as in Mary, P as in Paul. That means microprint. And then if you have really good vision, you can just look closely and you'll see it. If not, you'll need some sort of magnifying glass. And you're going to look at the actual line underneath where you're supposed to sign. That line just says authorized signature over and over and over and over and over again. What is the legal definition of authorized signature? An authorized signature is is a recognized mark made by someone who has the power to sign legal documents on behalf of an individual, which is a sole proprietorship, an organization, or a company.
Hmm.
The bank account is not your bank account. A personal bank account is not really personal. That's actually that's a false term. They probably have somewhere deep, deep, deep in the contract, it says the definition of the word personal means, and it personal could include, and then it's going to say corporation, an estate, a trust, a part. So there's something in there that makes it so they can legally say the word personal. Personal means that you, as the owner, assumed to be trustee, are the authorized signer on behalf of the account, which is held by a sole proprietorship, which is called an individual.
Ah, wow. Okay. Okay. Hmm.
So you got to ask yourself, oh, I want to be in the private. Fine. If you're in the private, you won't have bank accounts.
Right.
You won't have credit cards. You won't have debit cards. You won't have a checkbook.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have a driver's license. I mean, if you really want to be a purist and you want to go all the way, you wouldn't even have a passport.
Mm-hmm.
Passport's in the public.
Right. But to your point, there was something that you taught, and maybe this is different now, but you could be a non-citizen national and still have a passport.
Yeah, well, I was wrong about a lot of that stuff, which is something I'm working on right now. So I was teaching a lot of stuff about that, and if this is your first time seeing me talk, you're in luck because I taught some stuff that I thought was true, and turns out it wasn't quite what I thought it was. So I thought the word individual included the man or woman, and that was false information. And I know there's a lot of people who try to talk me out of that. I guess I'm kind of hard headed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the sole proprietorship is the one that's either the U.S. citizen or non-citizen national, not the free man of the union.
Ah, got
I
it.
was wrong about that. So for people who this is my first time talking on a show about this. So yeah, there's some changes that are going to be occurring with a lot of that. There's going to be some changes occurring to the explanatory statement for the passport. There's a lot of things that I have to do. This is sort of like the breakthrough that's going to cause me to create like a whole new course. It's not going to happen right away.
Mm-hmm.
So people are asking me all these questions. I don't know when everything's going to be done. It's going to take me some time to kind of go through everything and rewrite everything, and I have to rewrite all my websites and
Mm-hmm.
blah 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 blah. So the whole non-citizen national thing, I thought it had a lot of significance, and it was like a major part of my entire platform. That's actually shifting dramatically. The non-citizen national thing literally has nothing to do with you, which I know for people who have been following me for a long time, that's going to be like the most shocking thing they've ever heard me say. Uh, well, I can keep going with what I had originally been teaching, and I can be Mr. Know-it-all. Uh, that's one of the benefits of everything I do being free. I don't charge for my courses and my research because when there is some sort of situation like this, which doesn't happen very often, it's only happened a couple times. Um, I don't have to worry about it too much. It's not like I have people paying me. All my documents are free. So it's like, oh, Brennan, aren't you feeling bad or responsible for people? Well, first off, all the old documents and everything, we have processes that I'm realizing now should have never really worked that worked great. And it just goes to show you that the people on the other end that are receiving all this stuff don't have a fucking clue. There's something called a revocation of election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purpose of determining your income tax liability, which is something I've been doing all the way since the very beginning. It's actually a huge basic spinal cord element of my entire platform. That whole process is actually wrong. Not wrong from the standpoint of like people are going to get in trouble, just wrong from the standpoint of there's something else much simpler and much better that I'm going to be releasing that is actually totally workable as per the statutes and stuff. But what's funny is the revocation of election has been working wonderfully. so
Which just
so
goes to show that no one really knows what's going on here.
nobody has a fucking clue what's going on, man. So
Not even the people who are running the government.
we've had massive success using what's called the revocation of election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purpose of determining your income tax liability. And it used to be the end part of my entire presentation I would do on all my shows. You'll see all my shows at the very end. We go to a place called 26 CFR 1.871-1, and we talk about this thing, and we talk about the election, and I'm never going to do that again because the thing is that that's not a part of any of this anymore. It never really was, and I was incorrect on that. And there's a lot of guys in my area that are incorrect about that. I was probably the one yelling the loudest about the revocation of election, and now I'm about ready to bury it. So, but I'm going to be replacing it with something else when I bury it. That's the key, right? You never want to just kill something off and never give anybody something. That's why I haven't talked about certain things. Like if I figure out something that I'm like, oh shit, I'm always very careful. Like I want to figure out what do I replace this with before I make the announcement. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be clear on that, I'm not going to get into what I'm going to be replacing that with on this show necessarily. I mean, just because I feel like we have to go through the financial stuff more before I can show that solution.
Right.
So getting back to the financial stuff. So we have this unconditional promise to pay, which we've just covered all of that. And then we have the unconditional order to pay. Examples: traffic tickets, parking tickets, tax bills, utility bills, credit card bills, court order or judgment, a check, debit card transaction, medical bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
What people don't realize is that this is going to blow your mind. If you think anything else in this show is fucking blowing your mind, a lot of people are probably melted by this point. This is going to really melt your mind. A bill is cash.
How do you mean?
Cash, by definition, is typically if you define a Federal Reserve note as cash, it's a negotiable instrument in physical form that is negotiable, payable to the bearer, which we're going to get into in a second. But basically, a bill that you receive, a traffic ticket, a utility bill, is a paper negotiable instrument that's negotiable, payable to the bearer. It's the exact same structure as a Federal Reserve note. And I'll get into how that is in just a moment, right?
Okay.
So the rules change a little bit with notes. With notes, there's two different directions you can go. Maker, issuer, and then you have holder. To keep it simple, we're going to skip all of this because it's a little bit more advanced. So let's say, for example, you get a bill, an IRS bill, right? When you
Hmm.
receive that bill, you become what's called the holder of that bill, which is there's much longer, more complicated definition in UCC 3, but to keep it really simple, it's someone in possession of a bill or note that is payable to them or payable to bearer. Payable to bearer just means that it doesn't have like a specific payee on it, right?
Hmm.
Um, Whenever you get a Federal Reserve note, you're actually the holder of that note. So if you went to court and you were talking about Federal Reserve notes, you would refer yourself as the holder of an unconditional promise to pay. And then now you would go into what type of unconditional promise to pay are you the holder of? Well, it just so happens it's a Federal Reserve note. That's the terminology that you would actually, no one uses any of this terminology. No one knows any of this information, but this is how it is actually working without you realizing it, right? Now, when you become the holder of a note or bill, you can do what's called an endorsement. Endorsement means a signature. This is the long official definition here on the side, but I'll give you the short, simple definition. An endorsement, you see the word endorsement, ENDORSEMENT, on the back of your checks. You've seen
Hmm.
that word before. If
Right.
you look in UCC 3, they use more of a purist spelling of the word. It's INDORSEMENT, which is the same thing. I
Hmm.
use the INDORSE version because that's the version that they use in UCC Article 3. It's more of a purist spelling, right?
Okay.
So an endorsement, INDORSEMENT, it means basically like instructions as to how this particular instrument can be transferred, assigned, or redeemed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way it works is when you have an unconditional promise or order to pay, if there's no instructions already on it, then it's pretty much like the town whore. Anyone can pass it around. Anyone can do anything they want with it. A Federal Reserve note goes from hand to hand to hand. It gets dirty, nasty, grimy. Now, if I were to take a Federal Reserve note, toss it on this table right now and start writing endorsements on it, it would actually change the rules and laws associated with how that particular unconditional promise to pay could be exchanged, transferred, or redeemed to the
Got
point
it.
where if I handed it to you and it had a special endorsement on it and you handed it to somebody else, I could actually have you criminally prosecuted up to 25 years in prison. That's never going to happen. But I'm
Hmm.
saying, like, as per the actual law of the negotiation of negotiable instruments, I could prosecute you for illegal negotiation of negotiable instruments, which is like a 20 to 25 year in prison kind of a
Wow.
situation. It's pretty, but that'll never, ever, ever happen in a billion years just because no one knows any of this information, right? But there is actual Title 18 codes, criminal codes in terms of illegally negotiating and purloining negotiable instruments. And they're very, very serious. It's like the penalties are on par with like rape or murder. Very, very
Oh my
serious penalties,
gosh.
right?
Wow. Oh my God. Okay. So an endorsement is essentially the instructions for that security who
It's
it could
it's
be
the
paid
exchange. It's
to
it's the instructions for exchangeability,
for
and basically the way it
exchangeability.
works is the holder has the right to write those rules.
Right. Okay. Hmm.
So as the holder, you can write different endorsements, right? So a blank endorsement is the most basic type. If you do nothing with it or write nothing or just sign your name with no instructions, it's a blank endorsement. It does not state the payee and automatically makes the instrument payable to the bearer, meaning whoever you give it to next has the full value of the instrument.
Right. So let's just say, for instance, like you're exchanging what we would normally think of as cash, like
Federal Reserve
$5
note.
cash, Federal
Mhm.
Reserve note. You would be exchanging that as a blank endorsement to the cashier, who we could get technical, like the cashier would be the next
Holder.
holder, but then, wherever it goes next, it would be considered the holder, whoever it's exchanged to, because it's not being specifically given instructions to who's the next holder through the exchange.
Correct. So when you start looking up in UCC 3 how that works, instruments that are made payable to the bearer can be exchanged by transfer of possession alone.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's what's
That is
actually
that.
happening. So I am the holder of a five. I don't even want to use the word dollar,
Yeah.
Federal Reserve note. And
Mm-hmm.
by transfer of possession alone to the coffee barista become the new holder of said note, all under what's called a blank endorsement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I follow.
Now, what you ask yourself, well, where's the blank endorsement? Look at a Federal Reserve note, you'll see two of them. Federal Reserve note. You'll see two blank endorsements. You'll see one on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side. How do I boost this up? Oh, jeez. Let's see. Oh, beautiful. So we have two blank endorsements here.
Mm-hmm.
A blank endorsement is an endorsement that does not state the payee, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have one here by the Secretary of the Treasury, and we have one here by the Treasurer of the United States. Is that what it says? Treasurer
Yep.
of the United
Mm-hmm.
States? Okay.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Those are blank endorsements, right? A special endorsement is what you see on a check on your checkbook. It says pay to the order of, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
you write the name whom of which is going to be receiving the check. So
Right.
if this said pay to the order of Brandon Joe Williams, signature Secretary of the Treasury, that would not be a blank endorsement. That would be a special endorsement.
Right.
When people write the word cash on their checks, that's a blank endorsement. It's a
Mm-hmm.
blank
Okay.
endorsed instrument. It's a blank endorsed unconditional order to pay, which is called a bill, which is called a bill of exchange, which is called a draft. All those terms mean the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A check is a bill or a
Right.
bill of exchange or draft.
Mm-hmm.
Because a bill is an unconditional order to pay. A check is you are unconditionally ordering the bank. People think the word bill means you're being the one being ordered. Oh, I got a bill. People think a bill means I'm the one being ordered. No, a bill means anyone ordering anyone to pay.
Oh, interesting.
So a check is a bill because you are ordering them to move unconditional promises to pay, called Federal Reserve notes, from one location to another.
Oh, okay. I follow.
So it is a bill. Check is
Yep.
a bill.
Mm-hmm.
A check is an unconditional order to pay. A check is a bill. A check is a bill of exchange. A check is a draft. All of those sentences all mean the same thing
Got it. With a special endorsement.
with a special endorsement. Well, a blank endorsement too doesn't matter. A
Right.
blank
It could have
endorsed,
both.
a blank endorsed unconditional promise, unconditional order to pay. A blank endorsed bill. A blank endorsed bill of exchange. A blank endorsed draft. All those sentences mean all the same thing. A special endorsed unconditional order to pay, a special endorsed bill, a special endorsed bill of exchange, a special endorsed draft. All four of those sentences mean the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So what do we have here? We have an unconditional promise to pay. This is not a bill. This is a note.
Mhm.
Federal Reserve note. Remember from the flow chart,
Right.
there are two different types of negotiable instruments, an unconditional order to pay or an unconditional promise to pay, right? So a
Mm-hmm.
check would be an unconditional order to pay. Federal Reserve note is an unconditional promise to pay. They really pretty much operate the same way. This secondary thing over here is the only real change between
Mm-hmm.
how the two operate. In fact, you even have this important side note. If an instrument falls within the definition of both note and draft, the person who is endorsing the instrument, which is a different term we're not going to get into, may treat it as either one.
Okay.
So in fact, they're almost exchangeable in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is this other little avenue that makes things a little bit different for a minute, which we're not going to get into. It's a little more advanced. So you become the holder. Now, once you become the holder, you are the one who gets to choose what kind of endorsement you would like to use on the instrument. You could do a special endorsement. You can also do a qualified endorsement. Qualified endorsement is typically without recourse.
Mhm.
What does without recourse mean as a qualified endorsement? And this is where things get funny. Qualified endorsement, right? Without recourse as a qualified endorsement means the person signing the check is not liable if the check bounces or is not paid.
Oh my God. So it just basically removes the liability.
Correct. So that now you're starting to see why I don't give a shit if they consider me to be the trustee owner of the sole proprietorship.
Yeah. Okay.
Every
Interesting.
bill coming into the sole proprietorship is a negotiable instrument that can be endorsed using without recourse qualified endorsement. So so
Okay.
their
Mhm.
assumption that I am responsible for the debts of the sole proprietorship ends as soon as I write the word without recourse on the bill.
Okay. Whoa, 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 wait. So if you get a bill
I write
as
without
a,
recourse on it, I send it back, and now that's it. I don't have any responsibility over the bill anymore.
what? How do they respond when you do that?
They're idiots. They have no idea what's going on. Not a clue.
They're like, no, that's not gonna work.
Yeah, they have no idea. So people say, "Well, Brandon, how do I operate in the private?" And my response to that is, "Who gives a shit? Why would you want to?"
Hmm.
Yes, they assume that you are the owner trustee of the sole proprietorship's debts, but when you understand how negotiable instruments work, they can't ask you for gold and silver coins. It's illegal in Title 12 since 1933. They can't ask you for specie. They can only give you bills of exchange and promissory notes. The only debt they can give you can be instantaneously wiped off the face of the earth by writing without recourse on it.
Interesting. So any bill that you could get, technically you could endorse it with a qualified endorsement as yourself without recourse, and you are no longer liable for where that quote unquote money or currency rather is coming from. Where
Yeah,
that
so the real truth, the real truth of the matter is you are assumed to be the trustee owner over the debts associated with the sole proprietorship only up to the point where you endorse the bills, and then that assumption or that burden or that obligation instantaneously disappears, because you got to think too, it's not your obligation. Whose obligation is it?
I don't know whose it would be. Who would it be?
Here's your answer.
Oh, obligation or other security of the United States defined.
Let's
Oh
read
yeah.
this again.
Oh yeah.
The term obligation or other security of the United States includes all bonds, all certificates of indebtedness, all national bank currency, all Federal Reserve notes, all Federal Reserve bank notes, all coupons, all United States notes, all Treasury notes, all gold certificates, all silver certificates, all fractional notes, all certificates of deposits, all bills, all checks, all drafts. Does your utility bill fall somewhere into one of these some of this terminology?
Yes.
It'd fall in right here and right here.
Mm-hmm.
Because a bill and a draft mean the same thing.
Okay, so what is
Would your phone bill fit into one of these categories?
yes.
Would your credit card bill fall in one of these categories?
Yes.
Would the promissory note that's manufactured as the issuer when you create a brand new credit card transaction using your credit card fall into somewhere into this category?
Yes.
Would the promissory note for your mortgage fall somewhere into this category?
Yes.
Would the promissory note for the loan on your car fall somewhere into this category?
Yes.
Would the promissory note associated with a business loan fall somewhere into this category?
Yes.
Would the bill that they send you when they want you to pay your mortgage, which is an unconditional order to pay, fall somewhere in one of these categories?
Yes.
Exactly. Has anybody ever asked you for gold or silver coins?
No.
Precisely.
Okay, wait. So summarize this for me. So this obligation or other security of the United States, it's including literally everything in the whole system that is an exchange that the United States is responsible for?
Correct. So you can take bills that you're receiving for your truck or your business loan, and you can send them to, you can endorse them without recourse and send them to the Treasury to have the Treasury pay them.
Hmm.
So they're under the assumption that you, as the owner trustee of the sole proprietorship, need to pay these bills and pay these loans. But there's another key word here that we can clear up that will fix this up for you real nice. What's the definition of the word payment? People think the word payment means to send in Federal Reserve notes. And holy Jesus, that is the farthest thing from anything that has any relevance to anything. Federal Reserve note is one of a billion types of unconditional promises to pay. You could cook up an unconditional promise to pay right now using toilet paper. It's totally irrelevant, right?
Uh-huh.
The definition of payment means the performance of a duty, promise, or obligation, or discharge of a debt or liability by the delivery of money or other value. So by endorsing the instrument, you are making a payment. By placing without recourse onto a bill or bill of exchange or unconditional order to pay or draft, you are performing to discharge a debt or liability. Without recourse mean I hereby discharge all liability I have on this unconditional order to pay. By definition, the words without recourse written on an unconditional order to pay constitute the definition of the word payment. It is a payment.
Interesting. Just the act of doing that
Yes.
is considered a payment.
You're endorsing the instrument with a qualified endorsement, releasing personal liability. Yes.
But then when it says by the delivery of money or other value, where does that come into play?
Well, money is specie, other value is a negotiable instrument.
So for the payment, hang on, go back to the payment part.
So when they send you an unconditional order to pay, that unconditional order to pay within the commercial system under the Commerce Clause is cash.
Okay.
They are sending you cash. A parking ticket, you get so mad. Oh, I got a fucking parking ticket. They just stuck cash underneath my windshield wiper.
And what do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little more?
An unconditional order to pay is a negotiable instrument. A negotiable instrument is cash.
Got it. But we can't use it to
Of
be
course you can.
exchanged.
Of course you can.
How would we do that?
Endorse it. You can write without recourse, pay to the order of City of Glendale Parking Enforcement, mail it back into parking enforcement. And then at that point, if they don't apply it as a payment, you sue them for breach of contract and breach of UCC 3-311. They have to apply it as a payment. They don't have the option. And it's actually taken very seriously. It's the same as them stealing your Federal Reserve notes and then never counting the Federal Reserve notes as a payment. Federal Reserve notes is an unconditional promise to pay. Okay. Federal Reserve notes and the original bill that they send you are the same thing in law.
Interesting. So if you got, let's just say like a bill from the parking ticket's an easy one, but let's do another example, like a car loan payment. You got that bill in the mail or whatever. You said pay to the order of Toyota, special endorsement without recourse, or I'm sorry, qualified endorsement without recourse.
Well, it's both. The special endorsement means it states the payee. It states the person whom of which is going to be benefiting from the proceeds. And then the qualified endorsement is what releases personal liability for the endorser or the drawee or the drawer or whoever, right? So it's actually, if you did both, which is what you typically see with banks, I can show you what banks are doing. They do both. They do special and qualified at the same endorsement.
Got it.
So I'll show you some examples.
So then if you sent the bill back to Toyota doing both of those endorsements, then you have no liability to quote unquote exchange Federal Reserve notes or send them any money electronic or currency electronically. And they would then do what? Would they have to get it from the Federal Reserve, or would they just not get anything for that? Like, how does that part of the exchange work?
So at that point, that particular unconditional order to pay is actually classified as U.S. currency.
Okay.
Because it's anything that falls underneath that. I mean, it was U.S. currency when you got it.
So would they then interpret that like in their books as them having received it, even though they didn't technically receive like the numbers on their screen?
They don't have a choice. If they receive U.S. currency, they'll send you a letter stating that what you sent in isn't a payment. They only accept U.S. currency. But the thing is that that bill is U.S. currency. It's an obligation or other security of the United States, and it's an unconditional order to pay. So it is U.S. currency.
So that definition that we saw just then about the obligation of the United States, that's what is considered currency. Can we go back to that?
Well, no, currency is 12 USC 5103. No, definition of U.S. currency, U.S. code. Let's see here. No, 31. There it is. Legal tender. 31 USC section 5103. United States coins and currency, including Federal Reserve notes and circulating notes of Federal Reserve banks and national banks, are legal tender for all debts, public charges, taxes, and dues. Now look at this one. Foreign gold and silver coins are not legal tender for debts. When they say foreign, what are they talking about?
Private.
The Union, the men and free men of the Union. Gold and silver coins are a part of the Union, which is a foreign world to United States.
Oh, wow.
So when they say foreign gold or silver coins, they're saying that fucking crazy ass country we have nothing to do with, that we don't interface with at all unless there's some kind of a business involved over there, called the Union, or it's also called the United States. Their currency, called gold and silver coins, will not be legal tender in our commercial corporate world.
Wow. So interesting.
So they say including Federal Reserve notes, right? But any currency includes all banknotes, all promissory notes, all bills of exchange, everything. Currency means literally everything under the sun, moon, and stars. If
So
they said
you're
the
saying
word,
that me sending that bill to Toyota is considered currency,
it's
that which
legal tender.
that's what they're asking for.
They're asking for legal tender or U.S. currency, and they don't realize that what you sent them is legal tender U.S. currency.
So we're kind of hacking the system a little bit based off of their definitions.
Everything is legal tender. Everything is U.S. currency. A parking ticket is U.S. currency legal tender.
Interesting.
Technically, if you really want to be cantankerous, you can go and buy a bunch of coffees. You can take the parking ticket off of your windshield, write an endorsement on it, or nothing. If you write nothing on it, it's blank endorsed, payable to the bearer. You can go into the coffee shop. You can hand the ticket to the coffee barista. She'll tell you you're crazy, videotape the whole thing, and you can actually sue Starbucks for not accepting legal tender, not accepting U.S. currency, and you will actually win, and you can get damages because they did not exchange coffee for a parking ticket.
Do we have case law yet that would preface that?
Not to my knowledge, no. But that's how it works, guaranteed, 100%. All unconditional orders to pay are negotiable instruments. They are cash. If they don't have specific payee information on them, when you read UCC Article 3 in great depth, anything that doesn't have special endorsement is automatically defaulted to a blank endorsement, payable to the bearer, meaning payable to whoever is in possession of the note or bill. So if you are in possession of a note or a bill as the holder, it's payable to you as the bearer. So you think that a parking ticket means you need to pay them. In fact, that's just cash. You basically have a bond or stock in your possession, which makes you the holder of that bond or stock. And that bond or stock has nothing to do with you as the man or free man of the union. It's directed only and exclusively at the sole proprietorship.
Now, what would happen in the case of if they are conflating us, which they are, right? Like the physical person or the physical woman that I am, the physical man that I am, not man, but you know what I mean, the free man version of the union version of me, and the sole proprietorship are combined. And if I send a bill back as currency, let's say to Toyota or to the IRS, then they technically would have the ability to put like a lien on my house, or they would be able to take me to jail eventually. Like they would take my physical body or they would take some of my belongings. Would that be legal or illegal in this
Well,
world of
yeah,
our
the
definitions?
IRS can do levies and all sorts of good stuff. It's really easy to fix. IRM section 3.8.45.5.10.1 .5.10.1. The IRS has already told you how to fix this situation. 3.8.45.5.10.1 of the Internal Revenue Manual tells you exactly what you do if you would prefer to have the Treasury of the United States manage their own obligations or other securities of the United States in relation to being the trustee owner of the sole proprietorship. If a bill of exchange, which again means an unconditional order to pay, so if the IRS sends you an order to pay, it's a bill of exchange, or registered bill of exchange, is received from a taxpayer authorizing the campus to settle their account through Fedwire, send everything received to the following address. Now, what does this mean in English? It means if anyone gets a bill from the IRS and they endorse the bill and tender it back, allowing us to use that bill to basically settle itself as cash, send it to the Treasury. They even have a special room number for you.
Okay, wait. I need you to explain that one to me again. I'm not following it.
A bill of exchange is an unconditional order to pay.
Okay.
The system
Which
that we live
which the
in,
which the IRS would send to me,
yeah, it's cash. The IRS just sent you cash.
even though they're saying I need to pay them my Federal Reserve notes.
They never said that. You assume that.
Well, if they say like, order or total
You need to
due.
pay. They don't ever tell you Federal Reserve notes. They just say you need to pay. What's the definition of pay? To perform on a duty, obligation, or contract. What's
Mhm.
an endorsement? Performance on a duty, obligation, or contract.
Okay. So I get a bill of exchange from the
Yep.
IRS. I
Yep.
do that endorsement that says without recourse, and I
Pay
send
to
it
the
to.
order of Internal Revenue Service, or if you want to keep it simple, just pay to the order of bearer. If you make it pay to the order of bearer, the term negotiate or negotiable, that term means transferable. The way to make it the easiest for the IRS to deal with it is make it pay to the order of bearer, which is a blank endorsement, but you're being very, very explicit about the fact that it's blank endorsed. If you don't put anything on there, it's still blank endorsed. If you put paid to the order of bearer, it's still blank endorsed, but you're being very, very explicit and specific about the fact that it's blank endorsed. So without
Mhm.
recourse, pay to the order of bearer by colon, and then that's where you sign your name. That would be the full endorsement. And what you're saying is, hey, I'm going to give this to you guys in a way where you guys can toss it around and do whatever you need to get payment on this, or to go to the Federal Reserve discount window and exchange your Federal Reserve notes, which that's how it works. They can take that bill and go to what's called the Federal Reserve discount window, and they can exchange your Federal Reserve notes. I can teach you about that too in the next section of this presentation. But basically, what you're doing is you're releasing that legal tender or U.S. currency in a way where they can transfer it by possession alone. Makes it much easier for them to move that particular negotiable instrument around. But you did put that qualified endorsement on there. So basically, if you put the qualified endorsement on there, what you're saying is, hey guys, you can take this negotiable instrument, which is cash, and you can go ahead and settle this account using Fedwire. But I want to let you know that I no longer have any responsibility over non-payment of this. Don't contact me anymore about this. This is not my bill anymore, and I hereby release all personal liability on this bill forever. That's the
Mm.
without recourse qualified endorsement.
So they wouldn't be able to then turn it back around and
No,
just send it back to you.
no.
So why don't they write without recourse on their bills?
Uh,
They just
the
don't know
banks
it?
do. The banks do. Here's banking endorsements. This is how I learned all of this. What we started to do is we started to get copies of mortgages, promissory notes, business loans, and we started to look and see if we could find endorsements on the originals, and we started finding this terminology. And this is actually what got me starting to look at all of this special endorsement without recourse. This is actually what kind of blew open this whole subject for me. I started to notice this writing on these various promissory notes. So we have here, without recourse, paid to the order of Rocket Mortgage LLC, FKA, Quicken Loans LLC, by signature, name of person signing, title of person signing. And if you notice, you'll start to see it's always that same series. Paid to the order of Countrywide Home Loans Inc. without recourse. Countrywide Document Custody Services, a division of Treasury Bank N.A. by signature, Lori Meader, Vice President. Here's another one, paid to the order of. It's on the same document. This one has 2 endorsements, so it must have gotten transferred twice. Paid to the order of, without recourse, Countrywide Home Loans, Inc. by signature, David A. Spector, Managing Director. And we're going to look at some more of these. Without recourse, paid to the order of Quicken Loans, LLC, by E.L. Erica Monique Hill, Capture Manager. Paid to the order of PHH Mortgage Corporation, without recourse, Town and Country Bank. No signature on this one. Terry L. West, Executive Vice President.
Interesting.
Starting to see a pattern here. Paid to the order of, without recourse, by American Home Mortgage Acceptance, Inc. Signature, Janet Cruz, Assistant Secretary. Without recourse, paid to the order of Homebridge Financial Services, Inc., DBA Real Estate Mortgage Network. Signature, Carly Francis, Assistant Secretary. Paid to the order of, without recourse, United Wholesale Mortgage. Signature, Maria something Limon, AVP Operations.
So these are banks that are sending these exchanges, bills of exchange, to other banks for the mortgage of the house.
Yeah, we can get into that now. So how does that work? So when you sign a promissory note for a mortgage, how does the mortgage get funded? Everybody thinks that they're giving you other money, other currency that they already have, that other people have deposited into the bank to you, and you're getting access to other people's currency that they've deposited into the bank. That's not even remotely close to what occurs. So what happens is, this is 12 USC 412 application for notes. This comes from the Federal Reserve Act, Section 16, Part 2. Any Federal Reserve Bank may make an application to the local Federal Reserve agent for such amount of the Federal Reserve notes herein before provided for as it may require. Such application shall be accompanied with a tender, which means unconditional offer. The legal word tender, it means unconditional offer. I tendered a Federal Reserve note means I unconditionally offered a Federal Reserve note.
Okay.
Such application shall be accompanied with a tender to the local Federal Reserve agent of collateral in amount equal to the sum of the Federal Reserve notes it's applied for, and such pursuant to such application. Now here it is. Here's the kicker right here. The collateral security thus offered shall be notes, drafts, bills of exchange, or acceptances. So what are they doing? They're taking your original unconditional promise to pay, where you unconditionally promised to pay the mortgage. They're doing a qualified and special endorsement. They're doing an application for notes. They're taking your original promissory note where you unconditionally promised to pay for the mortgage. They're putting that original unconditional promise to pay up as a collateral security, and they're exchanging and swapping the value for that collateral security for Federal Reserve notes at the Federal Reserve discount, Federal Reserve discount window. They have their own website.
Wow.
The Federal Reserve discount window. Discount means like certain amount goes in and then there's a certain discount that comes off, probably these numbers here, primary credit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what is actually happening with a mortgage or a credit card transaction? Credit card transactions is the same thing. You're signing an unconditional promise that you'll pay in the future, which is a promissory note. That promissory note is a negotiable instrument. That negotiable instrument can be given the same kinds of endorsement, and then that negotiable instrument can be taken to the Federal Reserve discount window, and then it can be swapped for Federal Reserve notes. Now, let me ask you, what are the two systems that are used to access the Federal Reserve discount window?
I mean, banks, right? Is that what you mean?
FedWire and FedNow.
Oh, I've not heard of those.
Now let's go back to what we saw at 3.8.45.5.10.1. Let's reread this again and see if it makes any difference. If a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange is received from a taxpayer authorizing the campus to settle their account through FedWire, send everything received to the following address.
Interesting.
So let's reread this in English. If you receive an endorsed bill of exchange and the person who sent it is going to allow us to go and swap that bill of exchange on at the Federal Reserve discount window, which will allow us to just basically settle their bill for them, send it to the Treasury.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. So you can give the IRS permission to go to the discount window on your behalf to
when
go
they
get
send
Federal
you
Reserves.
a bill, they're asking for your permission to exchange the original bill via an application for notes 12 USC 412 for Federal Reserve notes using FedWire, which accesses the Federal Reserve discount window.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
They're not asking you for Federal Reserve notes. They're asking you for permission to use the bill to go and get Federal Reserve notes.
Whoa. Wow. Mind blown.
And all you're doing is just you're saying, "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll just give you Federal Reserve notes instead. You don't need to go to the window."
Oh my gosh. What? Oh my God. Okay, I'm having like another mind blown experience like I did when I watched a course. Wow. That's
So
insane.
do I give even the slightest flying fuck that they think that I am the trustee owner and I am responsible for the quote unquote debts, which are all negotiable instruments? They can't ask me for specie. Now, let's say things changed and now they can ask me for specie. You bet your ass I'm going to be cutting ties with that fucking sole proprietorship. As long as they aren't asking me for specie, which they can't do, it's highly illegal. As long as they're only asking me for Federal Reserve note or negotiable instruments, I could give a fuck less.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm playing the game. I'm playing the commercial game. I'm using that sole proprietorship to get rich inside of the system, and they can't anything they send me. I just instantaneously discharge, but using a signature.
Wow.
So I get all.
Damn.
So the problem with the public versus private conversation is everyone is riding the center line. What I mean by that is if you have a car that's in the public, yeah, it's not your asset. But the liabilities and expenses also aren't yours either. So think about it this way. You can go out and get 17 brand new trucks, send all the bills to the Treasury, they'll pay for all of it. Do you own those trucks? No. Are you allowed to use those trucks for what they think is commercial purposes? Yes. Are you entitled as the registered owner to all profits or dividends associated with using that truck in a commercial venue? Yes. Are you liable for any of the payments or repairs or anything else associated with keeping that truck on the road? No.
Because you can just send it as a bill of exchange to
They
go get
aren't
it
your
exchanged at the
bills.
Federal
They
Reserve
aren't your
window.
bills.
Wow.
They aren't your bills.
Whoa.
It is incorrect that they're sending you the bill. It's not your bill. It's totally correct. All they're asking for is permission to settle the account on FedWire or FedNow. FedNow is the new one. FedNow is for smaller amounts and it's faster. FedWire is the one that they've had since forever, and that's the one that is for larger amounts and for settling larger amounts and stuff like that. That's why in the IRM they don't say FedNow. They say FedWire. But I think
Interesting.
as the FedNow system expands, we're going to be seeing more. The FedNow is what they want to use for the CBDC system,
CBDC system.
the central bank digital currency system.
Got it. Wow. Okay, wait. So back to our earlier example with the Toyota sending me a bill for the car. If I send that qualified special endorsement back to them, that's giving them permission to go get the Federal Reserve notes from the Federal Reserve discount window.
You can also send it to the Treasury and have them handle it for you too, and then just let the financing company, Ford Finance or whoever, let them know that you've sent that bill to the Treasury, and they're going to be the one to address that for you, or you can CC them or whatever. Yeah, there's a million different ways you can do it as long as you have without recourse on there. You're basically now if you send the bill to the Treasury and it's without recourse, and you never tell the financial company that you've done it. How is the financial company supposed to know that you've already made a payment and that it's without recourse and you don't have any recourse anymore on the instrument? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, you have to inform all the parties involved. Now the problem is that you're going to inform the parties. They're going to have no clue what the fuck you're talking about. They're going to call you a sovereign citizen. They're going to ignore you and repo the vehicle. Now what do? That's why I've gotten so heavily into litigation. Mm-hmm. Litigation is how you force these organizations to follow the law. Litigation is literally just to force a conversation and to force them to follow the law. That's all.
Right. Which that's kind of where a lot of these things end up going because they don't really understand it. So you have to use litigation as a means to communicate this to them.
Yeah, they won't even talk to you. So in litigation, they'll talk to you. They can't wait to talk to you, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of litigation. Litigation opens up that communication line, right? So in the public, yeah, you don't own the vehicle, but you also don't have to pay any of the liabilities. So you get pulled over and you get a ticket, no problem. It's not your ticket. You get pulled over and they take the car, go get 15 more. Who cares? The public's pretty cool. If you think about it, in a way, the public's pretty fucking cool. The problem is you aren't the sole proprietorship. You have a sole proprietorship. And as that sole proprietorship, you can get anything you want for free with a signature. You can have 15 cars and this and that. So you say to yourself, I want to own my vehicle. Okay. If you get rid of the certificate of title and the driver's license and everything else, now you're in the private. The problem with being in the private is yeah, it's yours. Yeah, it's your asset. Yeah, the state doesn't own it anymore. It's not pushed up against the public debt like we saw how the new money is used for, that kind of purpose. But at the same time, you now have all the liabilities as well. Mm-hmm. You have to pay to fix your car. You have to pay for the car itself. You have to pay to fix the car. I mean, in the private, really, you should be using gold and silver coins ultimately, right? And in the public, you have negotiable instruments and Federal Reserve notes, right? Right. But if you think about it, you could have 10 cars. 5 of them could be private and 5 of them could be public. Now, the problem is that what everyone's doing is they're riding the center line, meaning they've given the asset to the federal government while they're also paying the liabilities as though
they're getting the shit end of both sticks.
They're getting the shit end of both sticks, right?
Yeah.
So the best end of both sticks really isn't even possible. But in a perfect world, it would be where you have full control over the asset while at the same time you send all the liabilities into the Treasury, right? Mm-hmm. I don't personally think that's even possible. The only way that'd be possible is that it would have to be in the public. So for all the people out there that have certificates of title, you have to make a decision. Do you want the Treasury to start paying for everything for you? Do you want the Treasury to buy you a whole bunch more cars that they own? Or do you want to take full control over the asset and the liabilities? You already think you have full control over the liabilities. You don't.
Right.
If you have a certificate of title, it's not your car, and those bills are not your bills, and those tickets are not your tickets.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
In the private, police can't give you tickets. It's physically impossible. They think they can, but really, legally, it's physically impossible because there's no commercial interface, and there's no certificate of title. There's no ownership. Police are just policing that of which they own because they're just a private police force on behalf of the business called State of California.
Right.
So the police of state of California is just a private security force policing their own shit.
That makes sense
In the
because it
private,
owns everything
in
in
the
the public.
private, when you get rid of the certificate of title and you get rid of all these things, they don't own it anymore. So they have no right of title. They have no ability to create a commercial transaction called a traffic, whatever. They can't even manufacture the goddamn things. They
Right.
don't realize this, but in law, that's how it works, right? So there are benefits to being in the private, right? But the thing is that when you really, really start to learn how all this stuff works, the public is just fine.
Interesting. Yeah, because
Get pulled over, give me fucking 60 tickets, bro.
what
What do
about
you
if they take you to jail though?
Well, that's a whole nother conversation.
Okay. Well, we
That
don't have to go there.
your body gets held as surety on the bond for the payment. Once you endorse the payment and discharge the payment, then the body is released.
Got it. Okay.
Your
Interesting.
body is held because you aren't performing.
It's kind of
Performing
like the collateral.
it's the collateral because you haven't made a payment, and the simplest version of make a payment is endorse the instrument. So let's say I was in a jail cell because there was no payment on some sort of infraction. I would say, oh, give me an unconditional order to pay, and I'll be sure to complete that payment immediately. You get the unconditional order to pay in the cell, you sign it without recourse, pay to the order of, and you ask the guy, hey, if I write a check, who do I make it out to? Glendale Police Department. That's who you write on the face of the bill. Glendale Police Department by, sign your name there, Brandon Joe Williams, blah, 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 hand it back to them. They're going to say you're a sovereign citizen, you're batshit crazy, all this stuff. You just want to make sure you have evidence that you made that payment, and then now you're going to sue the police department.
Got it. Do you think that those would have to always end in litigation at this point because we don't have case law, or would it actually go through if somebody tried to do that?
It's pretty rare that it goes through without a hitch. It does happen. It's very, 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 very slowly happening a little more, but it's
Like, do you
pretty
do that in your
slow.
personal life? Is that what you do with your bills? And
Some of them, yes, some of them, no.
okay, what makes you decide which ones yes and which ones no?
Like my utility bill, like I'm doing a bunch of stuff with that. I have litigation. Actually, my case was just dismissed. I actually have to refile it in state court. I filed it in the wrong court. I filed it in federal court. I should have filed it in state court. It's all part of the learning process. That is going to be, I'm going to send in some more. I actually have them right here on my desk, and then I'm going to be going to state court with those. My American Express stuff is like my most popular stuff. The American Express stuff that I have, it's sort of a complicated answer because like that shit's been going on since like the very beginning, and like I've tested like a million different things, and I had like no fucking clue what I was doing. So like that's just like pure fucking chaos all the way through everything. And then I sued them, and then that was fucking chaos. And then that got dismissed, and then I went to appeals, and now I'm in like an appeals case. So the MX stuff is just like I was doing all sorts of crazy shit, conditional acceptance and a lien. I was going to file a lien, didn't even know what that meant. Like I just and then that changed, and then I did some other stuff, and then that changed, and then as I started to learn the negotiable instrument stuff, and then when I filed the first lawsuit, it was in like January or February, and I was still like kind of confused on some of the way some of this stuff works. So I wrote this complaint that like kind of was a bit convoluted, and then the judge supposedly didn't understand it, which maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But anyways, it's been kind of a long, but like now we have a much better understanding of things, and now I don't do this process on everything. And the reason why is sometimes they'll close your accounts, right? So let's say, for example, you've got like 6 different credit cards. Just pick one. Go on a spending spree, and then send them the bill, and then sue them, and then do the whole thing. Or if you have like student loans are my favorite because student loans has like zero risk. So if you have student loans, that's the best place to start doing all this stuff. Another option is utility bills. If you're scared that they're going to turn off your utilities, there's 2 different options you have. Option number 1 is just to keep paying with Federal Reserve notes. I mean, really,
Simple enough.
there's nothing stopping you from just you send in the endorsed bills. They ignore you and tell you to go fuck yourself, or they have additional questions. The whole time you're answering additional questions. You call their legal team. You want to go into mediation. You sent in some bills of exchange that were endorsed and they were never marked as a payment. Blah 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 blah. Then you start to sue them. You sue them in small claims court, which is really cheap, fast, and easy. That one gets thrown out. Okay, now you're going to go to a state court, more of a big boy court. Blah blah. While you're doing all of this to get them to follow the law, just pay with Federal Reserve notes. Who cares? Or when you file the lawsuit, you're going to file a temporary injunction. So you're going to have the complaint, and then you're going to have an attachment, and it's going to be a temporary injunction. The temporary injunction is going to be, hey, the plaintiff here is going to continue to get utility services until the lawsuit is concluded. If the lawsuit is concluded and the plaintiff doesn't win, all of the back charges on the utility account will all be payable 60 days, within 60 days or 90 days. You write the order. People don't understand that about litigation. In litigation, if the judge signs an order, you wrote the whole motherfucking thing. It's just got a little signature thing at the bottom. So like if you wrote an order to motion the court into discovery, it'd be like a whole thing, notice of motion to discovery, all the information as to why it needs to happen, what occurred, blah, 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 blah. And then there'd be an attached proposed order. And then the proposed order would say, I, judge, blah, 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 hereby motion this court to discovery as per this local rule, blah, blah, blah. And then you already wrote all that shit. You already wrote why it needs to happen. The judge reads and then signs. That's it.
Got it.
You're doing the fucking job for the judge the whole time in litigation. People don't realize that's how litigation actually works.
Right. Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
So if you want to write a temporary stay or a temporary restraining order or a temporary injunction to not have to pay your car bill or your truck bill or whatever until the litigation is completed and the judge signs it, boom, you don't need to pay now throughout the entire life of the litigation. Now, if
so
the case
some
is,
of these,
if the case is dismissed and it was 9 months of payments, now all of a sudden you got to pay $6,000 or the repos guy is going to show up within 60 days. Okay. So it just depends on how you want to do it. You can either continue paying with Federal Reserve notes, or you can ask for some sort of temporary stay or injunction, or just fucking not do anything and roll the dice and see what happens. And typically they'll just come and take your shit or yeah. If there's not some sort of agreement there, typically they'll just do whatever they would do if you just didn't pay, basically.
Got it. So these like activities, being in the public and having the Federal Reserve credit window pay for stuff, that's something that you're having mixed success with. Sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not working. And when it's not working, you're going into litigation. But sometimes it is working and you don't have to go into litigation.
No, it's like 99% of the time litigation.
Okay.
and if it works this month, it may not work next month. Even so people think like, oh, it worked. Oh my God. And everybody's screaming and freaking out. And I did a show with this guy named George, and he had it work one time. Oh my God, $3,400. And they credited the account, blah, blah, blah. Everyone was fucking screaming. And I did a show with him. It was so cool. And then the next month they didn't take it. So you also have that too. So
is that the case with more like, entities outside of the IRS, let's say? Because according to the IRS code, they would do that. Would you put that in like a letter to them or something?
The IRS is hilarious. The IRS is the easiest organization to work with, and they're actually the organization that actually follows the law better than anybody else.
Because they probably know it better. Yeah.
The IRS is the only organization that you can do this shit with, and they'll actually process what you send them. They won't send you a receipt. They won't ever tell you that they processed it. But they do a really good job of actually processing this stuff. Like, for example, you can get a bill from the IRS. You can follow what I just showed you. You know, I'm making a letter right now that you can download, but you don't even need a letter. You don't need anything from me. Dear IRS. as per 3.8.4.45.5.8.1, which states the following. If you receive a bill of exchange or registered bill of exchange from a taxpayer authorizing the campus to settle the account on Fedwire, send it to the following address: 1500 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, room 3414, Washington D.C. 2220. I know all this because
I'm like,
looking.
wow,
I've been
you've
working on this a lot
memorized.
the past couple of weeks. And then just below that, thank you very much for offering the service to settle the account of the taxpayer using Fedwire. I hereby authorize you to settle the account of the taxpayer using Fedwire. Thank you very much. If you need anything else, you can call me at blah number. You can email me at blah email, or you can mail me at blah mailing address. Thank you very much. Signature. Send it
Hmm.
in.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. So, given that, I am so shocked that 3 hours has passed. Like, what? How did that happen? How can people find you? Where can they learn more about this, dive in even deeper?
Onestupidfuck.com.
Tried and true to your
People
authentic
think I'm
self.
joking. Yeah, people think I'm joking. The law firm and the Amnesty Coalition and all this stuff and the nation's website, that's all like secondary. The main hub where everything's located is onestupidfuck.com. The flow chart I just sent you, the public and private flow chart, that's been a lot of massive breakthroughs that have happened over the past like 10 days. A lot of things are changing. So you're going to see a lot of information when you sign up about the non-citizen national stuff. A lot of that's changing. You're going to see a lot of stuff about the revocation of election. That's changing. So I'm going through like a bit of a shift right now with some of this stuff.
Like a
So
metamorphosis.
so I apologize if some of it seems a little confusing. It seems confusing because it is confusing. So there's some changes happening. The non-citizen national stuff applies only and exclusively to the sole proprietorship, and the reason why I wasn't sure on that was the terms natural person and the term individual. And as I've dug into those terms more and more and more and more and more and realized more and more about the Commerce Clause and the plenary power, uh, the word individual and the term natural person has nothing to do with the man, free man of the union. And that was just something I didn't really realize. I thought that we were part of the definition of the word person.
Mm,
Um, and that's why I had so much information about the non-citizen national stuff. Frankly, it's very sad to say it. The non-citizen national stuff is pretty much irrelevant to everything now. I'm pretty much throwing the whole thing out entirely, which is
mhm.
saying a lot because it's been like a main spinal cord subject for like my entire platform since even the very beginning.
Right.
So it sucks, but that's what we have to do. So that's what we're going to do.
Well, I admire you for that.
And I'm developing processes. I haven't talked a lot about this because I'm developing processes to replace all these things. So, for example, I'm not going to get into it now. It's kind of more for my regular audience, but you're going to see once I'm really happy with the flow chart and I feel like it's totally done, I'm going to do a full like intense breakdown for like my normal people, like going through every fucking box.
Hmm.
And then on that same video, I'm also going to put all of the replacement information and processes in that video. So, and
Cool.
then yes, this information is basically going to spark like a 3.0 version of the course, but I'm just not going to shoot that right now. It's a lot of work. I just did 2.0,
I know you
so it's like kind of
worked so
annoying.
hard on that.
So that's going to take a little bit of time, but there will be a little like attachment video that'll go at the end of the course. It'll be like, hey, these things have changed. Here's the new processes. And then eventually, as we move forward, we'll start getting into shooting all the videos again and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah,
So it's the
going to your
free
website.
contract killer course is the
Yep.
best place to start. You'll see a link to that right on onestupidfuck.com.
Perfect. And people can sign up for your emails too, which they can get all of that information sent directly to their inbox, which is great. They can follow you on Instagram, Facebook too. Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram. I do have a TikTok. I don't use it much. And then X. I actually started using X quite a bit more recently.
Nice.
So X is definitely more active. Instagram is quite active. Facebook is quite active. And then TikTok, I just don't really like the platform that much. So I don't really do nearly as much, and I don't really respond to much. So.
Okay, good to know. Well, you are such a whiz. You remember everything. You have such an amazing memory, and I really appreciate the humility in getting to transform and turn over new leaves and just learn. You are such a big explorer and learner, and I really appreciate all of your time that you have invested into the people that are going to be watching this. Thank you so very much for all your wisdom and expertise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
If you loved this episode and or maybe others that you've listened to, please leave a review wherever you're listening to this. Share it with somebody that you think it could help. That's the biggest way you can help me help even more people like us. And if you want one-on-one support, feel free to go to findinghomehealing.com and schedule an intro session with me there. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll see you in the next one.